Good evening, friends, and welcome back. Before we settle into tonight's story, tell me something in the comments. What time is it where you are? Are you listening from the United States, England, Canada, Australia, or somewhere else in the world? I always enjoy reading where these journeys through history are reaching people. And if you enjoy slow, thoughtful historical stories, you already know what to do. Leave a like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. Your comments help keep these stories alive. Now dim the lights a little. Imagine a quiet American suburb in the 1950s. The lawns are perfectly trimmed. The houses shine beneath the afternoon sun. Children ride bicycles along clean sidewalks. A smiling woman stands at her front door wearing a neatly pressed dress, her hair carefully styled, dinner already planned. For decades, this image has been sold as the picture of happiness. But what happened to the women who did not fit into that picture? What happened to the women who never wanted that life? Or the women who tried desperately to want it and simply could not? Tonight, we explore a darker truth hidden behind one of the most celebrated decades in modern history. Because in the 1950s, fitting in was not simply encouraged. For many women it was expected. And failing to fit in could come with consequences that were rarely discussed in public. Imagine America at the end of the Second World War. Millions of soldiers were returning home. Factories that had produced tanks and aircraft were shifting back to consumer goods. Families wanted stability after years of depression and war. The nation longed for normality. The government, advertisers, magazines, television programs, churches, schools, and community leaders all helped promote a common vision of what a successful American life should look like. The ideal family centered on a husband who earned the income, a wife who managed the home, and children growing up in a comfortable suburban neighborhood. Historians often describe this period as an era of conformity and domesticity. To many people, this vision seemed comforting. The world had been chaotic. Now there was order. There was prosperity. There was a clear set of expectations. But beneath the polished surface, reality was far more complicated. The first thing to understand is that the famous image of the 1950s housewife was never the complete story. Even during the decade most associated with stay-at-home mothers, millions of women continued working outside the home. Women made up roughly 1/3 of the American workforce, despite enormous pressure to prioritize marriage and motherhood. Yet public culture often told a different story. Television shows presented cheerful households. Women's magazines offered advice about pleasing husbands, decorating homes, and raising children. Advertisements suggested that fulfillment could be found through modern appliances, spotless kitchens, and successful homemaking. The message appeared everywhere. A good woman was expected to marry. A good woman was expected to support her husband. A good woman was expected to find satisfaction in domestic life. Now imagine being a woman who looked around and felt different. Perhaps you wanted a career. Perhaps you wanted adventure. Perhaps you wanted education more than marriage. Perhaps you never felt comfortable with the role society had prepared for you. Perhaps you were divorced. Perhaps you remained unmarried. Perhaps you were ambitious in ways that made other people uncomfortable. The problem was not merely that these choices existed. The problem was that they often challenged what society believed a woman should be. And in the 1950s, standing apart from the crowd could attract unwanted attention. Consider the young women entering colleges during the decade. Many certainly pursued serious academic goals. But a widespread cultural stereotype suggested that women attended university primarily to find husbands. The phrase, earning an MRS degree, became part of popular conversation, reflecting assumptions that marriage was more important than professional ambition. A woman who openly declared that she intended to build a lifelong career could face skepticism. People might ask why she wanted to compete with men. They might wonder whether she was selfish. They might question whether something was wrong. The criticism was often subtle rather than dramatic. A raised eyebrow, a disapproving remark, a relative asking why she was still single, a neighbor wondering when she would settle down. Small moments repeated again and again. And over time those moments could become exhausting. Meanwhile, The economic boom transforming much of America was creating a powerful illusion. New suburban neighborhoods spread rapidly across the country. Affordable homes attracted young families. Automobiles connected communities. Consumer products filled stores. To many observers, prosperity seemed universal. Yet not everyone benefited equally. African American women often faced barriers that the idealized suburban image ignored entirely. Working-class women frequently continued working because their families needed additional income. Many immigrant families experienced different realities than those portrayed on television. The celebrated vision of domestic perfection largely reflected a white, middle-class suburban ideal rather than the experiences of all American women. But public memory would later focus heavily on that ideal. As a result, many women whose lives did not match the picture felt invisible. Imagine opening a magazine and never seeing someone like yourself. Imagine watching television and realizing your life is absent from the story. Imagine hearing the same message repeatedly. Happiness looks one specific way. And then imagine discovering that your own happiness looks different. For some women, this tension remained private. For others, it became a source of deep frustration. Historians often point toward the growing dissatisfaction that quietly existed beneath the decade's image of contentment. Long before the feminist movements of the 1960s gained national attention, many women were already questioning whether domestic life alone could provide fulfillment. Yet these feelings were rarely discussed openly. After all, how do you explain unhappiness when everyone around you insists you are living the dream? The pressure to appear grateful could be immense. Beautiful house, healthy children, modern conveniences, a successful husband. By every visible measure, life appeared ideal. And still some women felt trapped. Others felt restless. Others felt unseen. Their stories seldom appeared in advertisements. They rarely became the subject of television programs. But they existed in quiet kitchens, suburban living rooms, office buildings, classrooms, and city apartments across America. And as the decade progressed, those hidden feelings would begin to accumulate. Slowly, quietly, almost invisibly, until the perfect image that seemed so solid from the outside began to reveal its first small cracks. Those cracks were not always dramatic. In fact, most people living through the 1950s probably did not notice them at first. Life continued as usual. Children went to school. Fathers commuted to work. Television sets flickered in living rooms each evening. Neighbors waved to one another across neatly trimmed lawns. Everything appeared normal. Yet beneath that appearance, countless women were carrying private thoughts they rarely shared aloud. One reason was simple. The culture of the 1950s placed enormous value on fitting in. After the hardships of the Great Depression and the uncertainty of World War II, many Americans viewed conformity as a source of security. Following accepted social norms seemed safer than challenging them. To understand why this mattered, imagine being a woman who had experienced the war years. During World War II, millions of women entered factories, offices, and industries previously dominated by men. Posters celebrated workers like Rosie the Riveter. Women learned new skills, earned paychecks, and contributed directly to the war effort. For some, those years brought a sense of independence they had never known before. Then the war ended. The nation shifted its focus. Returning servicemen needed jobs. Families were encouraged to rebuild traditional households. Women were urged to leave many wartime positions and return to domestic roles. Not every woman resisted this change. Many genuinely welcomed family life. Many enjoyed raising children and creating homes. But others struggled with the transition. Imagine spending years proving your abilities in demanding workplaces, only to be told that your highest purpose now existed exclusively within the walls of your house. The adjustment was not always easy. Yet discussing such frustrations openly could be risky. A woman who expressed dissatisfaction might be labeled ungrateful. She might be accused of neglecting her family. She might be told that the problem existed within herself rather than within society's expectations. This pattern appeared repeatedly throughout the decade. The conversation was rarely about whether the expectations were fair. Instead, attention often focused on whether women were meeting those expectations successfully. As a result, many women learned to remain silent. Silence became part of daily life. At neighborhood gatherings, conversations often revolved around children, recipes, household products, and community events. There was nothing inherently wrong with these topics. But deeper concerns frequently stayed hidden. Questions about identity, questions about purpose, questions about ambition, questions about loneliness, questions about whether there could be more to life than what society prescribed. In many cases, these thoughts remained locked away for years. The pressure was especially strong because the 1950s celebrated expertise in homemaking. Advertisers promised that new appliances would make life easier. Washing machines, vacuum cleaners, refrigerators, and electric ovens appeared in advertisements across the country. Companies marketed these products as symbols of progress. The modern American housewife became a central figure in countless advertising campaigns. Yet there was a strange contradiction. Technology was supposed to save time. But instead of reducing expectations, it often increased them. Homes were expected to be cleaner. Meals were expected to be better. Children were expected to be better supervised. Standards continued rising. Women often found themselves working constantly despite the promise of convenience. A spotless home became more than a goal. It became evidence of personal worth. Imagine spending hours each day trying to meet impossible standards. Dusting, cleaning, cooking, laundry, shopping, childcare, planning, organizing. Then imagine being told that fulfillment should naturally come from these activities alone. For some women it did. For others it did not. And that difference mattered. The women who struggled often felt isolated because they believed they were alone. After all, everyone else appeared happy, at least from the outside. The smiling photographs in magazines reinforced this illusion. Magazine covers rarely showed exhaustion. They rarely showed depression. They rarely showed uncertainty. Instead, they presented cheerful families and confident homemakers. A young woman looking at those images might conclude that everyone else had figured life out. If she felt unhappy, perhaps the problem was her. That belief could be devastating, because once people begin blaming themselves for structural pressures, they often stop questioning the system itself. Many women internalized these messages. They wondered why they felt restless, why they felt bored, why they felt disconnected, why they sometimes sensed that important parts of themselves were disappearing. The answers were not always obvious. Psychologists during the period frequently interpreted women's dissatisfaction through a narrow lens. Rather than examining social expectations, experts sometimes suggested personal adjustment as the solution. Women were encouraged to become better wives, better mothers, better homemakers. The possibility that societal expectations themselves might be contributing to the problem received less attention. Meanwhile, another reality existed beyond suburban neighborhoods. Not every woman had the luxury of staying home. Millions worked because their families depended on their income. Working-class women often balanced employment with household responsibilities. Their days could begin before sunrise and end long after dark. Factory workers, office clerks, waitresses, nurses, teachers, secretaries, retail employees. Many faced exhausting schedules. Yet even employed women frequently encountered cultural pressure to prioritize marriage and family above professional aspirations. Career advancement opportunities remained limited. Pay disparities were common. Promotion paths often favored men. Women were frequently expected to leave jobs after marriage or childbirth. Imagine knowing you are capable of more responsibility. Imagine seeing less qualified colleagues advance ahead of you. Imagine understanding that your opportunities are restricted simply because of your gender. Such experiences became familiar to many women throughout the decade. And then there were the women who never married. Their situation could be particularly difficult. American culture of the 1950s strongly emphasized marriage as a central milestone of adulthood. Single women often faced suspicion or pity. People wondered why they had not married. Family members asked questions. Friends offered advice. Strangers made assumptions. A woman living independently could be viewed as unusual. Sometimes she was treated as incomplete. Sometimes as an object of curiosity. Sometimes as a problem needing correction. The social pressure could be relentless. Even successful women were not immune. A respected teacher, talented writer, a skilled professional. Their achievements might still be overshadowed by questions about their marital status. Why are you still single? Don't you want children? When are you settling down? Questions like these echoed throughout countless conversations. For women who genuinely preferred independent lives, such scrutiny could feel deeply unfair. Yet challenging those expectations publicly required courage. The same pattern affected divorced women. Although divorce existed throughout American history, it still carried significant stigma during much of the 1950s. A divorced woman often found herself navigating suspicion, judgment, and social exclusion. Neighbors talked. Communities speculated. People searched for someone to blame. And more often than not, blame fell heavily upon women. The ideal family image left little room for alternative stories. But alternative stories existed everywhere. Hidden behind curtains. Hidden behind smiles. Hidden behind carefully maintained appearances. And while many Americans celebrated the decade as an age of harmony and stability, an entirely different story was unfolding beneath the surface. A story filled with quiet dissatisfaction, quiet resistance, quiet loneliness, and eventually quiet change. Because the women who did not fit in were not disappearing. They were observing, they were thinking, they were reading, they were questioning. And across the country, without realizing it, many of them were beginning to ask the same dangerous question. If this perfect life was supposed to make everyone happy, why were so many women secretly unhappy? That question did not arrive suddenly. It crept into people's minds during ordinary moments, while folding laundry on a quiet afternoon, while standing at a kitchen sink after dinner, while staring out a window as children played in the yard, while sitting alone after everyone else had gone to bed. The question often appeared when there was finally a moment of silence. And silence, strangely enough, could be uncomfortable. The 1950s are often remembered as a decade of prosperity, but prosperity did not automatically solve emotional struggles. A larger house could not answer questions about identity. Modern appliances could not explain feelings of emptiness. Financial stability could not guarantee personal fulfillment. Yet many women felt pressure to believe otherwise. If they had healthy children, a comfortable home, and a hard-working husband, they were expected to feel satisfied. When they did not, guilt often followed. Imagine waking up each morning and feeling that something important is missing. Now imagine believing you have no right to feel that way. That combination could be deeply isolating. Many women kept such thoughts hidden even from close friends. Some feared being judged. Others worried they sounded selfish. Still others could not quite put their feelings into words. After all, how do you describe a problem when society insists the problem does not exist? This silence became one of the defining features of the era. Historians looking back at personal letters, diaries, interviews, and memoirs have found countless examples of women struggling privately with expectations that appeared perfectly normal from the outside. What makes these stories especially fascinating is that many women initially blamed themselves. Instead of questioning the social system, they questioned their own character. Perhaps they were not trying hard enough. Perhaps they were failing as wives. Perhaps they were failing as mothers. Perhaps they were simply different from everyone else. That last thought could be especially painful. Nobody wants to feel out of place. Humans naturally seek belonging. We want acceptance from our families, communities, and neighbors. The women who did not fit into the ideal image often found themselves caught between authenticity and acceptance. To fit in, they might have to hide parts of themselves. To be themselves, they risked criticism. Neither option felt comfortable. One place where this tension became particularly visible was higher education. Throughout the 1950s, increasing numbers of women attended colleges and universities. Many were intelligent, ambitious, and eager to learn. But educational opportunities often came with conflicting messages. A young woman could excel academically while simultaneously being encouraged to view marriage as her ultimate goal. Professors, parents, and social expectations frequently reinforced the idea that professional achievement should remain secondary to family life. For some students, this created confusion. Why pursue education if society expected them to abandon their ambitions later? Why develop talents that might never be fully used? These questions lingered long after graduation. Some women attempted to balance both worlds. They married, raised families, and pursued careers. But doing so was often far more difficult than it sounds. Childcare options were limited. Workplace flexibility was uncommon. Employers frequently assumed that married women were less committed to their jobs. A woman trying to build a career often faced obstacles that her male colleagues never encountered. Even simple professional aspirations could provoke resistance. Imagine telling people in the 1950s that you wanted to become a lawyer, executive, scientist, or political leader. Some would encourage you. Others would not. Many women encountered subtle discouragement from an early age. The message was rarely direct. Instead, it arrived through expectations, through assumptions, through social norms. Girls and boys often received very different guidance about their futures. A boy's ambition might be celebrated. A girl's ambition might be viewed with caution. Too much independence could make people uncomfortable. Too much confidence could be criticized. Too much determination could be mistaken for arrogance. These attitudes did not affect every community equally. America was a large and diverse country. Experiences varied by region, class, race, religion, and family background. Yet the broader cultural pressure remained powerful. And for women who already felt different, those pressures could become overwhelming. Consider the experience of women who were creative. Writers, artists, musicians, thinkers. Women whose minds constantly generated ideas. Creative work requires time. It requires concentration. Requires space. Many found those things difficult to obtain. Domestic responsibilities consumed enormous amounts of energy. A woman might spend her entire day caring for others before finally finding a few quiet minutes for herself. By then, exhaustion often won. Some creative dreams slowly faded. Not because talent disappeared. Not because passion disappeared. But because circumstances made those ambitions difficult to sustain. The loss was often invisible. Nobody could see the novels that were never written, the paintings that were never completed, the businesses that were never started, the discoveries that were never pursued. Yet these invisible losses formed part of the hidden history of the decade. And then there was another group of women who faced even greater challenges. Women whose identities placed them outside accepted social norms entirely. For lesbian women in the 1950s, life could be extraordinarily difficult. The era was marked by intense pressure to conform, and homosexuality was widely stigmatized. Many lived in secrecy. Many feared exposure. Many risked losing jobs, housing, friendships, or family relationships if their identities became known. Imagine carrying such a secret every day. Imagine carefully monitoring your words, your behavior, your friendships, your appearance. The emotional burden could be immense. For these women, the demand to fit in was not merely uncomfortable, could become a matter of survival. The same decade that celebrated conformity often punished difference. Not always through laws. Not always through public scandals. Sometimes through whispers. Through exclusion. Through social isolation. Through opportunities quietly denied. The consequences were real even when they remained invisible. And invisibility itself became part of the problem. When society refuses to acknowledge certain experiences, people often feel alone in them. A woman struggling with expectations might assume nobody else shared her feelings. A woman questioning traditional roles might believe she was unusual. A woman feeling trapped might think everyone else was thriving. In reality, many women were experiencing similar doubts. But they rarely had opportunities to recognize one another. Each sat alone with thoughts that were far more common than she realized. Cross suburbs, cross cities, cross small towns, cross farms, cross classrooms, cross workplaces. The same questions quietly surfaced again and again. Questions about freedom. Questions about purpose. Questions about individuality. Questions about whether there might be more possibilities than society allowed women to imagine. Those questions did not yet have a movement behind them. They did not yet have famous books, national organizations, or political campaigns. At this stage, they mostly existed inside individual minds. Private thoughts, private frustrations, private dreams. But history has shown many times that major social changes often begin exactly this way. Not with protest, not with speeches, not with headlines, but with ordinary people sitting quietly and wondering whether the world around them could be different. And as the decade moved forward, more women were beginning to wonder exactly that. And while many women were quietly questioning their place in society, another powerful force was shaping daily life in ways that are often forgotten today. Fear. Not fear inside the home. Not fear of neighbors. But fear of the wider world. The 1950s were not simply an era of shiny automobiles and suburban comfort. They were also years of Cold War anxiety. Many Americans lived with the constant awareness that nuclear war was possible. Children practiced air raid drills in schools. Families discussed bomb shelters. Newspaper headlines regularly carried stories about tensions between the United States and the Soviet Union. The future felt prosperous, but it also felt uncertain. In times of uncertainty, societies often cling more tightly to tradition. People look for stability. They seek familiar roles and familiar expectations. And during the 1950s, traditional family life was frequently presented as one of the strongest defenses against social instability. The ideal family became more than a personal aspiration. It became part of a national story. Political leaders, religious organizations, educators, advertisers, and media figures often portrayed strong families as essential to the nation's success. As a result, women carried a significant burden. They were expected not only to maintain households but also to help preserve social order itself. This expectation could make any deviation from accepted norms seem unusually threatening. A woman who rejected traditional roles was not merely viewed as making a personal choice. In some circles, she appeared to be challenging deeply held beliefs about how society should function. That reaction helps explain why certain women encountered such strong resistance. Take, for example, women who remained focused on careers after marriage. Today, that choice might seem ordinary. In many modern workplaces, married women with careers are commonplace. But during the 1950s, attitudes were often different. Many employers assumed that a married woman's primary responsibility belonged at home. Professional ambitions could be interpreted as signs that something was wrong with her priorities. Imagine working hard to earn respect in your profession. Imagine proving your competence repeatedly. Then imagine hearing people suggest that your real place is somewhere else. The frustration could be profound, and it often remained hidden beneath polite smiles. The same pattern appeared in popular culture. Movies, television programs, and advertisements frequently reinforced traditional expectations. The heroines of many stories eventually found fulfillment through romance, marriage, and family life. There is nothing inherently wrong with such endings. For countless women, those experiences genuinely brought happiness. The problem arose when alternative paths received far less recognition. Women who wanted different futures rarely saw themselves reflected in mainstream culture. Their stories existed. They simply received less attention. As a result, many women struggled to imagine possibilities beyond what society presented. It is difficult to pursue a life you rarely see represented. This brings us to one of the most important aspects of the decade: the difference between appearance and reality. From a distance, the 1950s often look remarkably uniform. Photographs show smiling families. Television shows depict tidy homes. Advertisements celebrate domestic bliss. Yet real life was far more complicated. Behind every photograph was a unique individual. Behind every family was a private story. Some women loved the lives they built. Others felt constrained by them. Some found purpose in motherhood. Others longed for opportunities they never received. Some successfully balanced multiple responsibilities. Others struggled beneath expectations that seemed impossible to meet. The reality was never one-dimensional. But public culture often simplified it. That simplification had consequences. When only one version of womanhood receives widespread approval, everyone outside that version faces challenges. Sometimes those challenges appear obvious. Sometimes they emerge gradually over many years. Consider mental health. Today people speak more openly about anxiety, depression, burnout, and emotional well-being. In the 1950s, such conversations were often far more limited. Mental health struggles certainly existed. Human beings have always experienced emotional difficulties. But many people lacked the language or social support needed to discuss them openly. Women experiencing loneliness or dissatisfaction frequently found themselves isolated. Friends might encourage them to focus on positive aspects of life. Family members might dismiss concerns. Communities often expected resilience rather than reflection. As a result, many women carried emotional burdens privately. The silence surrounding these experiences could make them even heavier. Imagine spending years wondering why you feel unhappy. Imagine having few opportunities to discuss those feelings honestly. Imagine believing that everyone around you is thriving while you alone are struggling. That perception could become deeply damaging. Yet countless women lived through exactly that experience. The pressure intensified because comparison was everywhere. Neighborhoods often functioned as close-knit communities where people observed one another's lives. Neighbors noticed new cars, new appliances, home improvements, children's achievements. Appearances mattered. Reputation mattered. Social approval mattered. For women who already felt different, this environment could feel restrictive. Every interaction carried subtle reminders of what society expected. Casual conversation might turn toward marriage, toward children, toward household responsibilities, toward traditional roles. Women whose lives followed different paths frequently found themselves explaining, defending, or justifying their choices. Over time, these small moments accumulated. And accumulation matters. One critical comment might be forgotten. Hundreds of comments create a pattern. One raised eyebrow might seem insignificant. Years of raised eyebrows tell a different story. Many women learned to navigate these pressures carefully. They developed public identities that fit expectations while keeping parts of themselves hidden. Outwardly they conformed. Privately they questioned. This dual existence became remarkably common. The contrast between public appearance and private reality would later become one of the most important themes in historical studies of the era. Because when historians began listening to women's personal accounts decades later, they discovered stories that often differed dramatically from popular memories of the decade. The famous image of universal contentment began to look incomplete. Not false, but incomplete. Some women truly flourished within traditional roles. Others did not. And understanding the 1950s requires acknowledging both realities. One of the most revealing details is that dissatisfaction did not necessarily correspond to material hardship. Many women questioning their lives were not impoverished. They were not starving. They were not lacking basic necessities. In fact, some lived quite comfortably. Their struggles centered on something less visible: identity, autonomy, purpose, recognition, the freedom to define their own futures. These desires are difficult to photograph. They rarely appear in advertisements, yet they shape human lives profoundly. A woman could have every material comfort society promised and still feel that essential parts of herself remained unexplored. That realization frightened many people because it challenged a comforting assumption: the assumption that prosperity automatically creates happiness. For some women, the decade gradually revealed that happiness is more complicated than that. And as these realizations spread quietly from one mind to another, the gap between society's ideal image and many women's lived experiences continued to widen. The gap remained mostly invisible, but it was growing. And before long, that hidden gap would begin producing consequences that neither advertisers nor television producers could fully conceal. Those consequences did not arrive with a single dramatic event. There was no one morning when America suddenly woke up and realized that many women were struggling beneath the surface. Instead, the evidence appeared slowly, scattered across countless individual lives. Conversation between friends. A diary entry written late at night. A letter sent to a trusted relative. A private moment of frustration that never reached the public eye. When viewed separately, these moments seemed small. When viewed together, they revealed something much larger. One of the most difficult realities for women who did not fit into the accepted mold was the feeling of being constantly observed. In many suburban communities, privacy could be surprisingly limited. Neighborhoods were designed to encourage interaction. People knew one another. Families attended the same schools, churches, and community events. Children played together. Neighbors exchanged news. This sense of community offered many benefits, yet it could also create pressure. Imagine living in an environment where everyone seems aware of everyone else's business. Imagine knowing that your choices may become topics of discussion. What you wear, how you raise your children, whether you work outside the home, whether you attend social events, whether your marriage appears successful. The scrutiny was not always intentional. Often it emerged naturally from close-knit communities. But for women who already felt different, it could become exhausting. Some learned to perform happiness, not because they were dishonest, but because appearing content was easier than explaining dissatisfaction. A smile required less energy than a difficult conversation. Many became experts at presenting a version of themselves that fit public expectations. The performance was convincing, sometimes so convincing that even close friends never realized what was happening beneath the surface. This hidden emotional labor became a defining feature of many women's experiences. They managed households, they cared for children, they supported husbands, and simultaneously they managed perceptions. The world saw one version of their lives. Their private thoughts told another story. As the decade progressed, researchers, writers, and social observers occasionally noticed signs that something was not quite matching the popular image. But these observations often remained fragmented. The dominant narrative of domestic happiness was powerful. It appeared everywhere. Advertisements continued showing cheerful kitchens. Television families continued solving problems within half an hour. Magazines continued presenting polished images of family life. The repetition itself reinforced the message. When people encounter the same story repeatedly, it begins to feel unquestionably true. Yet real life rarely follows simple narratives. Take motherhood, for example. The 1950s celebrated motherhood as one of the highest achievements available to women. Many mothers genuinely found profound joy in raising children. Their love for their families was real. Their dedication was real. Their happiness was real. But motherhood is also demanding. It involves sacrifice, fatigue, uncertainty, and responsibility. Those realities existed then just as they exist now. The difference was that discussing difficulties openly often proved more challenging. A mother who admitted feeling overwhelmed risked appearing inadequate. A mother who admitted feeling lonely risked judgment. A mother who admitted wanting time for herself sometimes encountered criticism. As a result, many women felt pressure to suppress perfectly normal emotions. Imagine spending years believing that every difficult feeling should remain hidden. Imagine carrying that burden alone. Over time, isolation could deepen. The same pattern emerged in marriage. Popular culture frequently portrayed marriage as the natural solution to life's uncertainties. Find the right husband, build a family, live happily ever after. Reality, of course, was more complicated. Marriage could bring companionship, love, and stability. It could also involve conflict, disappointment, and unmet expectations. Not every marriage was happy. Not every husband was supportive. Not every household resembled television. Yet discussing marital problems openly was often discouraged. Protecting appearances became important. Many couples maintained public images that concealed private struggles. For women trapped in unhappy relationships, options could be limited. Economic dependence often played a significant role. Many wives relied heavily on their husbands' incomes. Leaving a marriage could involve enormous financial risks. Even when divorce became legally possible, social stigma remained powerful. A divorced woman frequently faced challenges that extended far beyond the end of the relationship itself. Communities often judged her harshly. Opportunities could shrink. Friendships sometimes changed. The message was clear. Maintaining the appearance of a successful marriage often seemed preferable to acknowledging failure. This reality created another hidden layer beneath the decade's cheerful image. And then there were women whose ambitions extended beyond domestic life. Their stories reveal another side of the era's darker truth. Imagine a woman with exceptional talent. Perhaps she dreams of becoming a scientist, perhaps a journalist, perhaps an architect, perhaps a lawyer. Her intelligence is obvious. Her determination is obvious. Her potential is obvious. Yet throughout her life, she encounters subtle reminders that such goals may not be appropriate. Teachers encourage her, but only to a point. Family members express concern. Friends assume she will eventually abandon those ambitions after marriage. Employers view her career as temporary. None of these obstacles alone seems overwhelming. Together they form a barrier. A barrier made not of laws alone, but of expectations. Expectations can be remarkably powerful. People often adjust their dreams according to what seems possible. When society repeatedly signals that certain paths are unavailable, many stop pursuing them, not because they lack ability, but because they lack encouragement. This is one of history's great invisible losses. We can count buildings. We can measure economic growth. We can track population changes. But how do we measure unrealized potential? How do we calculate the inventions never created? The books never written? The businesses never launched? The discoveries never made? Those losses rarely appear in historical statistics. Yet they matter. The women who did not fit into the 1950s ideal often carried possibilities that remained unexplored, not because they lacked talent, but because the environment around them limited opportunity. Meanwhile, younger girls were learning from everything they observed. They watched mothers. They watched teachers. They watched neighbors. They absorbed messages about what women should become. Some accepted those messages comfortably. Others felt uneasy. A young girl who dreamed differently might struggle to find role models. She might wonder whether her ambitions were unrealistic. she might learn to keep those ambitions private. The cycle repeated itself across communities throughout the country. And still, beneath all these pressures, change was quietly taking shape. Not public change. Not yet. Something smaller. Something harder to notice. Women were beginning to recognize that their experiences were not unique. The realization often came unexpectedly. Conversation with a friend. A magazine article. Personal letter. College reunion. A workplace discussion. Suddenly, a woman who believed she was alone discovered someone else felt the same way. Then another. And another. These connections mattered. Because isolation weakens people. Shared understanding strengthens them. The moment individuals realize their private struggles are shared by others, those struggles begin to look different. What seemed like a personal failure may actually reflect a broader social pattern. That realization can change everything. By the late 1950s, many women were still living within the expectations of the era. Most continued fulfilling the roles society assigned to them. But beneath the surface, questions were multiplying. Quiet questions. Persistent questions. Questions that would not disappear. And as those questions spread from one woman to another, a growing number were beginning to suspect that the problem was not simply themselves. The problem might be something much larger. One of the most revealing signs that something larger was happening appeared in places that historians often overlook. Not in political speeches. Not in newspaper headlines. Not in official government reports. Instead, the evidence appeared in ordinary conversations. Women gathered over coffee. They met at church events. They talked during school functions. They visited one another's homes. And occasionally, when trust had been established, the conversation shifted. The cheerful surface cracked for a moment. A woman admitted she felt lonely. Another confessed she missed working outside the home. Someone else wondered whether life was supposed to feel this repetitive. These exchanges were often brief. Sometimes they were followed by nervous laughter. Sometimes by quick changes of subject. Yet they mattered. Because each conversation challenged the assumption that everyone else was perfectly content. For many women, simply hearing another person voice similar feelings brought enormous relief. Imagine believing for years that your dissatisfaction is a private flaw. Then imagine discovering that your neighbor, your friend, or your sister has been asking the same questions. The feeling of isolation begins to weaken. During the late 1950s, this quiet recognition spread slowly through countless personal networks. It did not yet have a name. It did not yet have leaders. But it existed. And it was growing. At the same time, broader social changes were creating new opportunities for women to compare experiences. More women were attending college than in previous generations. More women were entering professional and clerical work. More women were living in suburban communities connected by roads, media, and consumer culture. Paradoxically, the same modern society that promoted conformity also created channels through which dissatisfaction could spread. Television carried common images into millions of homes. Magazines circulated nationwide. Women across different regions encountered similar expectations and often developed similar frustrations. The pressure to conform was not confined to one town or one state. It became a national experience. Another important factor was the changing economy. Although the popular image of the 1950s emphasized the male breadwinner, many families relied on women's earnings. Rising consumer expectations, housing costs, and family expenses often made additional income desirable or necessary. Women worked as teachers, nurses, secretaries, sales clerks, factory workers, and in countless other roles. Yet even when employed, many were expected to treat work as secondary to family obligations. This created a difficult double burden. A woman might spend the day at a job and then return home to another full shift of cooking, cleaning, childcare, and household management. The workload could be exhausting. Still, public culture rarely celebrated this reality. The idealized housewife remained the dominant symbol. Working women often found themselves caught between competing expectations. Employers might question their commitment because they were women. Families might question their commitment because they worked. Either way, they were asked to prove themselves repeatedly. For women who did not fit neatly into traditional roles, the sense of being judged from multiple directions could become overwhelming. Race added another layer of complexity. The famous suburban ideal primarily reflected white middle-class experiences. Many African American women had long combined wage work with family responsibilities out of economic necessity. Their experiences often differed significantly from the popular media image of the stay-at-home suburban mother. Segregation, discrimination, and unequal opportunities shaped daily life in ways that the glossy advertisements rarely acknowledged. For these women, the pressure to fit into an ideal that was never designed around their realities could feel especially alienating. The same was true for many immigrant families and working-class communities. The 1950s were not one single experience. They were many different experiences occurring at the same time. Yet the public narrative tended to present one dominant story. And that story left limited room for women whose lives looked different. Perhaps the most painful aspect of the era was not open hostility, but invisibility. A woman who felt trapped often saw few public examples of alternative lives. A woman who remained single might rarely encounter positive portrayals of independent women. A woman pursuing a career could struggle to find models of long-term professional success. When society repeatedly ignores certain paths, those paths begin to seem impossible. That invisibility affected personal decisions in profound ways. Some women abandoned ambitions before fully exploring them. Some stayed in unsatisfying situations because they could not imagine realistic alternatives. Some delayed questioning their lives until much later, and some simply endured. Endurance became a common strategy. Keep going. Meet expectations. Do not complain. Do not make trouble. Do not embarrass the family. For many women, these unwritten rules shaped everyday behavior. Yet endurance has limits. Feelings that remain unspoken do not necessarily disappear. They often accumulate. And accumulation can eventually become impossible to ignore. By the end of the decade, the contrast between the public image of perfect domestic happiness and the private experiences of many women had become increasingly difficult to dismiss. The questions that had once seemed isolated were beginning to connect. Women were noticing patterns. They were recognizing shared frustrations. They were comparing lives and discovering common themes. Not every woman felt trapped. Not every woman wanted change. But a significant number were beginning to believe that the narrow definition of womanhood offered by mainstream culture was incomplete. That realization was subtle. It rarely appeared dramatic. Yet historically it was extremely important. Because once people start recognizing that their personal struggles may reflect broader social forces, they often begin looking for broader solutions. The transformation did not happen overnight. The 1950s would not end with a sudden revolution. Most women continued living ordinary lives. Most families continued following familiar patterns. But beneath the calm surface, something had changed. The women who did not fit in were no longer simply isolated individuals carrying private doubts. Increasingly, they were becoming aware of one another. And awareness is often the first step toward change. Quietly, almost invisibly, a new understanding was taking shape. The perfect image that had once seemed unquestionable was beginning to look less certain, less complete, less convincing. The smiles in the advertisements remained the same. The television families remained cheerful. The suburban lawns remained immaculate. But behind those familiar images, more and more women were starting to ask whether the story they had been given was the only story available. That question would soon become much harder to ignore. That question lingered in the background of everyday life. quietly following women through routines that rarely changed. Morning arrived. Breakfast was prepared. Children were sent to school. Beds were made. Groceries were purchased. Laundry was folded. Dinner was planned. The rhythm repeated itself day after day, week after week, year after year. For many women, these responsibilities were meaningful. They loved their families. They cared deeply about their homes. They took pride in what they built. Yet love and fulfillment are not always the same thing. A person can love their family and still wonder who they are beyond their family. A person can appreciate stability and still long for something more. That distinction was often difficult to discuss in the 1950s. The culture tended to treat domestic happiness as a complete answer. If a woman had a good husband, healthy children, and a comfortable home, many assumed she possessed everything she needed. But human beings are more complicated than checklists. People seek purpose in different ways. Some find it through family, some through work, some through creativity, some through education, some through exploration, some through combinations of all these things. The problem arose when society insisted that one path should fit everyone. And nowhere was that expectation more visible than in the rapidly expanding suburbs. Throughout the post-war years, suburban developments transformed large parts of the United States. Rows of nearly identical houses appeared across former farmland. New schools opened. Shopping centers expanded. Communities grew. To many Americans, these neighborhoods represented progress itself. Families gained space. Children gained safety. Homeownership became possible for millions. The dream seemed within reach. But dreams can look different depending on who is living them. Imagine moving into a brand new suburban home. First, everything feels exciting. The house is modern. The neighborhood is pleasant. The future appears bright. Months pass, then years. The routine settles in. Many women spent long hours alone during the day while husbands worked elsewhere. Neighbors were nearby, but meaningful adult companionship was not always easy to find. Cars often connected communities, but they could also create physical separation. The old urban neighborhoods where people constantly interacted were not always replaced by equally strong social networks. For some women, isolation became an unexpected part of suburban life. The loneliness could be difficult to explain. After all, they were surrounded by people. They had families. They had neighbors. Yet emotional isolation and physical isolation are not the same thing. A woman might spend an entire day caring for others without having a single meaningful conversation about her own thoughts or aspirations. Over time, that absence could become significant. Many women later described feeling as though parts of their identities were slowly disappearing. Not because anyone forced them to give up those identities, but because daily demands left little room for them. The aspiring writer found less time to write. The aspiring artist painted less often. The intellectually curious woman had fewer opportunities for deep discussion. The ambitious professional postponed plans indefinitely. Years could pass surprisingly quickly. And with each passing year, certain dreams seemed to drift further away. This experience was not universal. Many women successfully maintained personal interests and ambitions. Many found deep satisfaction in community involvement, volunteer work, education, religion, or family life. Yet for others, the narrowing of possibilities felt very real. One particularly revealing aspect of the era involved language itself. The words people use shape how they understand their experiences. Throughout much of the 1950s, there was limited public vocabulary for discussing dissatisfaction with traditional gender expectations. Women often lacked widely accepted ways to describe what they were feeling. If someone feels hungry, there is a clear word for the problem. If someone feels ill, there are words for that too. But what word describes the feeling of living a life that looks successful from the outside while feeling incomplete inside? Many women struggled to answer that question. Without language, understanding becomes difficult. Without understanding, solutions remain elusive. As a result, countless women interpreted their dissatisfaction as personal weakness rather than a response to social pressures. The belief could become self-reinforcing. If happiness is supposed to come naturally from domestic life, then unhappiness must indicate personal failure. At least that is how many women were taught to think. The conclusion seemed logical. It was also deeply painful. Imagine carrying disappointment while simultaneously blaming yourself for experiencing it. The emotional weight could be substantial. Another group of women faced a different challenge entirely. These were women whose personalities simply did not match society's expectations. They were outspoken, independent, opinionated, curious, assertive. Traits often praised in men could provoke criticism when displayed by women. A confident man might be described as a leader. A confident woman might be described as difficult. A determined man might be admired. A determined woman might be considered stubborn. These double standards were not universal, but they were common enough to shape many women's experiences. Girls often learned these lessons early. They observed which behaviors received approval. They noticed which behaviors attracted criticism. Gradually, many adjusted themselves accordingly. Some succeeded, others resisted, and those who resisted frequently paid social costs. Perhaps friends viewed them differently. Perhaps family members expressed concern. Perhaps employers overlooked them. The penalties were often subtle rather than dramatic. Yet subtle pressures can influence lives just as powerfully as obvious ones. History is full of moments where society encouraged conformity not through force, but through rewards and punishments woven into everyday life. The 1950s offer many examples. Women who fit expectations often received praise. Women who deviated from them often encountered skepticism. The message did not need to be spoken directly. People understood it anyway. At the same time, larger cultural changes were beginning to stir beneath the surface. The civil rights movement was gaining momentum. Young people were increasingly questioning authority. New ideas circulated through universities, books, and public discussions. The world was changing, even if those changes remained incomplete. Women were not isolated from these developments. They observed them. They participated in them. They learned from them. And some began applying similar questions to their own lives. Why should certain opportunities remain limited? Why should specific expectations apply only to women? Why should personal fulfillment follow a single prescribed path? These questions did not yet dominate national conversation, but they existed. And once questions enter public consciousness, they are difficult to remove. Each year, more women encountered them. Each year, more women shared them. Each year, the gap between public image and private reality became slightly wider. The suburban dream remained powerful. The ideal family remained influential. The advertisements remained optimistic. But underneath that carefully maintained picture, countless women continued living experiences that did not fit the narrative. Some endured quietly. Some adapted. Some accepted the limitations. And some began searching for something beyond them. What they were searching for was not always clear. Freedom, perhaps. Opportunity. Recognition. The ability to define success on their own terms. Whatever name they gave it, the search itself was becoming more common. And as the decade moved closer to its end, those searches were beginning to converge into something that would eventually become impossible for the nation to ignore. As the decade moved forward, something curious began happening. The women who felt different were still scattered across the country. Teacher in Ohio, a secretary in New York, a nurse in California, a housewife in Illinois, student in Texas. Most would never meet one another. Most had no idea that similar thoughts were unfolding in thousands of other homes. Yet they were connected by a shared experience. They were living inside a culture that often celebrated women while simultaneously limiting them. On the surface, women were praised constantly. Advertisements praised mothers. Politicians praised wives. Magazines praised homemakers. Religious leaders praised family life. The language sounded respectful. Sometimes it genuinely was. But praise can become complicated when it is attached to a narrow definition of value. A woman was admired for being a good wife. A woman was admired for being a good mother. A woman was admired for creating a beautiful home. But what if she wanted to be admired for something else as well? What if she wanted recognition for her intellect, her leadership, her creativity, her professional achievements, her discoveries, her ideas? That was where the tension often emerged. Many women did not want to abandon family life. They simply wanted room for additional identities. The problem was that society frequently treated those identities as secondary. And over time, some women began noticing how often their accomplishments were overlooked. Imagine attending a dinner party in 1957. The guests arrive. Conversations begin. People discuss careers, business opportunities, politics, and future plans. The men often speak about their work, their ambitions, their achievements, their goals. The women may be expected to discuss family matters, household concerns, or community events. Again, this was not true everywhere, but it was common enough to leave an impression. A highly intelligent woman could find herself excluded from conversations she was fully capable of contributing to, not because she lacked knowledge, because expectations had already assigned her a role. Many women later recalled experiences like these. Moments when they felt invisible despite being present. Moments when their opinions carried less weight. Moments when assumptions were made before they even spoke. The effect was subtle, yet repeated subtle experiences can shape an entire life. Perhaps a woman stopped sharing certain ideas. Perhaps she learned to stay quiet during discussions. Perhaps she lowered her expectations. Or perhaps she grew increasingly frustrated. Every individual responded differently. What united many of these experiences was the feeling that possibilities were being quietly restricted, not always by law, not always by direct commands, but by assumptions about what women should and should not do. One area where these assumptions became particularly visible was employment. Many occupations remained heavily gendered. Women often found themselves concentrated in specific fields: teaching, nursing, clerical work, retail, secretarial positions. These jobs could be valuable and meaningful, but opportunities beyond them were often harder to access. A woman interested in executive leadership might encounter barriers. A woman interested in science might encounter skepticism. A woman interested in politics might face dismissal. The obstacles varied. Sometimes they were institutional. Sometimes they were cultural. Sometimes they were simply expectations repeated so often that they seemed natural. Yet expectations are not the same thing as reality. Reality was demonstrating every day that women possessed abilities extending far beyond the roles society commonly assigned them. Some were already proving it. Quietly, patiently, persistently. A woman earned advanced degrees despite discouragement. Another built a successful career. Another published important work. Another led community organizations. Another challenged assumptions through example alone. These stories rarely received the same attention as the suburban ideal, but they existed, and they mattered, because each woman who succeeded outside traditional expectations expanded the boundaries of what seemed possible. At the same time, another development was beginning to influence women's lives. Television had become a central feature of American households. Families gathered around screens in the evenings. Programs reached audiences on a scale never before possible. This created a powerful cultural mirror. People could compare their lives with the lives they saw portrayed on television. The comparison was not always comforting. Television families appeared remarkably orderly. Problems were usually resolved quickly. Conflicts remained manageable. Households seemed harmonious. Real life, of course, rarely worked that way. A woman struggling with loneliness or dissatisfaction might watch these programs and wonder why her own experience felt so different. The gap between representation and reality could deepen feelings of isolation. The same thing occurred with magazines. Page after page displayed polished images of domestic perfection. The kitchens sparkled. The children smiled. The mothers appeared effortlessly cheerful. These images rarely reflected the complexity of real life. They were carefully constructed visions designed to sell products and aspirations. Yet many people measured themselves against them anyway. The result was a standard that few could realistically achieve. Even women who largely enjoyed their lives sometimes felt pressure to maintain impossible levels of perfection. Perfect homes, perfect children, perfect marriages, perfect appearances, perfect attitudes. Human beings are not designed for perfection, and the pursuit of it often creates anxiety. Many women carried that anxiety silently. They worried about falling short. They worried about judgment. They worried about disappointing others. The emotional labor required to maintain appearances could be exhausting. What makes this period especially fascinating is that so much of the struggle remained hidden. There were no dramatic public confrontations in most cases. No headlines. No major scandals. Just ordinary women moving through ordinary days while quietly wrestling with extraordinary questions. Who am I beyond the roles assigned to me? What do I truly want? What parts of myself have I ignored? What possibilities remain unexplored? Questions like these rarely announce themselves loudly. They emerge gradually, often over years. And once they emerge, they tend to persist. A woman might push them aside temporarily. Focus on responsibilities. Stay busy. Keep moving. But eventually a quiet moment arrives. The questions return. And each time they return, they become harder to dismiss. By the late 1950s, these questions were appearing in more and more lives. Not because women had suddenly changed. Because conditions were changing. Education was expanding. Media connected people more than ever before. New ideas circulated widely. The world was becoming more modern. Yet many expectations remained rooted in older assumptions. The contradiction was becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. Women were being encouraged to develop their minds, yet often discouraged from fully using them. They were being educated, yet frequently expected to limit their ambitions. They were being told they could contribute to society, but often only in approved ways. For some, the arrangement worked well. For others, it felt increasingly restrictive. And that feeling, the sense that one's life is being defined by someone else's expectations, was quietly becoming one of the most important undercurrents of the era. Most Americans could not yet see where those undercurrents were leading. The lawns still looked perfect. The advertisements still looked perfect. The television families still looked perfect. But beneath those carefully maintained images, a growing number of women were beginning to realize that fitting in had a cost. And many were starting to wonder whether that cost was too high. For many women, the cost of fitting in was not paid all at once. It was paid gradually. Small compromise here. Postponed dream there. A decision made to avoid criticism. An opportunity declined because it seemed inappropriate. A talent left unexplored because there never seemed to be enough time. Years passed this way. And what made the process especially difficult was that it often appeared reasonable in the moment. After all, life requires compromise. Every generation understands that. Parents sacrifice for children. Families make practical decisions. Responsibilities sometimes take priority over personal desires. The women of the 1950s were no different. Many willingly made sacrifices because they loved the people around them. The darker truth was not that sacrifice existed. The darker truth was that some women were expected to sacrifice far more than others, and often without recognition. Imagine a woman who excelled academically. Perhaps she graduated near the top of her class. Perhaps teachers praised her intelligence. Perhaps professors encouraged her future. Then she married, had children, focused on family responsibilities. Years later, she might look back and wonder what became of the version of herself that once dreamed so boldly. That question did not mean she regretted her family. Many women loved their husbands and children deeply. But human identity is rarely limited to one role. A person can cherish family while mourning lost possibilities. The two feelings can exist together. Yet the culture of the time often struggled to acknowledge such complexity. People preferred simple stories. Happy wife, happy home, happy ending. Real life was more complicated. And complication does not fit neatly into advertisements. One particularly revealing aspect of the decade involved age. Young women often experienced social pressure differently than older women. A woman in her early 20s faced intense expectations surrounding marriage. Friends married. Relatives asked questions. Communities paid attention. Remaining single beyond a certain age sometimes attracted unwanted curiosity. The language people used could be surprisingly harsh. Terms such as old maid still lingered in popular culture. The implication was clear. Marriage was not merely an option. It was treated as a measure of success. For women who did not marry, this created challenges that modern audiences may find difficult to fully appreciate. Imagine attending family gatherings where relatives constantly ask why you are still single. Imagine hearing subtle suggestions that something must be wrong. Imagine watching people define your worth through your marital status. Many unmarried women built rich, meaningful, independent lives. Yet public recognition of those lives often remained limited. The expectation of marriage was so powerful that alternative paths sometimes seemed invisible. The same pattern affected women who chose not to have children. Today such decisions are increasingly common and openly discussed. During the 1950s, they often attracted far more scrutiny. Motherhood occupied a central place within the era's understanding of womanhood. A woman who remained childless, whether by choice or circumstance, could face uncomfortable questions and assumptions. Again, the issue was not merely individual attitudes. It was the broader belief that there was a correct way to be a woman. The further someone moved from that ideal, the greater the social pressure often became. What makes this history particularly fascinating is how often conformity was maintained through ordinary interactions rather than formal rules. A neighbor's comment. A relative's advice. A friend's concern. Church discussion. A workplace expectation. These moments may seem minor. Yet together they formed an environment that constantly reinforced certain values. People absorbed those values almost automatically. Many never questioned them. Others questioned them privately. A smaller number questioned them openly. Those women frequently found themselves viewed as unusual. Consider women who expressed strong political opinions, or women who challenged community norms, or women who openly criticized traditional expectations. Such individuals existed throughout the decade, but speaking openly carried risks. Communities often valued harmony. Questioning accepted beliefs could create tension. As a result, many women learned to choose their words carefully. The pressure to appear agreeable became another form of conformity. A woman might disagree internally while remaining silent externally. This pattern appeared across countless situations. And silence has consequences. When concerns remain unspoken, problems can appear smaller than they truly are. The public image of widespread satisfaction persisted partly because dissatisfaction often remained private. Meanwhile, significant changes were taking place elsewhere in American society. The civil rights movement was gathering strength. Legal segregation faced increasing challenges. Young activists questioned long-standing assumptions about race and equality. Although these struggles involved different issues, they demonstrated something important. Social norms could be challenged. Long-standing beliefs could be questioned. Systems that appeared permanent could change. Women paying attention to these developments sometimes drew lessons from them. If society could reconsider one set of assumptions, perhaps it could reconsider others as well. The idea spread slowly, but it spread. Another source of change came through education and reading. Books, articles, and academic discussions exposed women to broader perspectives. College campuses became places where ideas circulated. Women encountered histories, philosophies, and social theories that encouraged critical thinking. Many discovered that their personal frustrations were connected to larger social patterns. This realization could be transformative. Imagine believing for years that a problem exists only inside your own mind. Then imagine discovering that countless others share the same experience. Suddenly the issue looks different. It no longer appears to be a personal failure. It begins to look like something broader, something structural, something worth examining. This shift in perspective would eventually play a major role in reshaping American society. But during the late 1950s, it was still unfolding quietly. Most women were not activists. Most were not participating in political movements. Most were simply trying to understand their own lives. Yet history often begins there. Large social transformations frequently emerge from ordinary people asking ordinary questions. Why am I unhappy? Why are these expectations so rigid? Why are opportunities distributed this way? Why do certain choices receive approval while others receive criticism? Questions like these can seem small at first, yet they possess enormous power. Because once people begin asking them, they often start seeking answers. And answers tend to lead to more questions. By the end of the decade, millions of women still lived within traditional roles. Many were content, many were not. The reality was mixed, complicated, and deeply human. What was becoming increasingly clear, however, was that the celebrated image of the 1950s woman did not represent everyone. Some women fit comfortably within it. Others never fit at all. And those women, the women who felt different, who felt constrained, who felt unseen, were gradually discovering that they were not alone. That realization would change far more than anyone yet understood. That realization did not spread through grand speeches or dramatic headlines. It moved quietly, almost invisibly. A woman might discover it while reading an article during a quiet afternoon. Another might hear it during a conversation with an old college friend. Someone else might recognize it while looking through old notebooks filled with dreams she had once intended to pursue. The moment was often deeply personal. A sudden understanding, private recognition, a feeling that something finally made sense. For years, many women had assumed that dissatisfaction meant failure. Now some were beginning to suspect that dissatisfaction might be telling them something important. Not that their lives lacked value. Not that their families lacked importance. But that human beings are more complicated than the roles society assigns them. This shift in thinking seems obvious to many people today. In the 1950s, it was far less obvious. The dominant culture remained strongly attached to certainty. There was comfort in clear expectations. Men should do this. Women should do that. Families should look a certain way. Success should follow a predictable path. The arrangement offered stability, but stability often comes with limits. And limits become increasingly visible to those who live against them. One group of women felt those limits especially strongly. These were women who had experienced a taste of independence and found it difficult to surrender. Some had worked during World War II. Others had pursued education. Others had lived on their own before marriage. Whatever their circumstances, they knew from personal experience that they were capable of more than society often expected. That knowledge could not easily be forgotten. Imagine spending years demonstrating competence in professional environments. Imagine making decisions, solving problems, and contributing meaningfully to important work. Then imagine being told that your greatest achievement should now be maintaining a household. For some women, the transition felt natural. For others, it felt restrictive. The difference mattered. Because expectations often failed to account for individual personalities. Not everyone desires the same life. Some people thrive in domestic settings. Others thrive in professional settings. Many thrive in both. Yet the culture frequently treated one model as universally correct. Women who wanted something different often found themselves navigating an uncomfortable tension between personal ambition and social approval. That tension could affect nearly every aspect of life. Career decisions, educational choices, friendships, marriage, even self-esteem. The psychological impact should not be underestimated. Human beings naturally seek acceptance. When important parts of your identity conflict with accepted norms, maintaining confidence becomes more difficult. Some women spent years wondering whether their ambitions were selfish, whether their frustrations were unreasonable, whether their desires were somehow inappropriate. The questions followed them quietly through daily life. And because these struggles were often internal, outsiders rarely noticed them. A neighbor might see a successful family. A friend might see a beautiful home. A relative might see a stable marriage. Only the woman herself knew what thoughts occupied her late at night when the house finally became quiet. This contrast between external appearances and internal realities remains one of the most important themes in understanding the decade. The 1950s were not simply an era of conformity. They were also an era of concealment. People concealed disappointments. They concealed frustrations. They concealed doubts. Not necessarily because they were dishonest, but because social expectations encouraged certain stories while discouraging others. The result was a culture where many struggles remained hidden from view. One revealing example involved education. Parents often encouraged daughters to pursue schooling, yet the reasons could differ significantly from the reasons given to sons. For boys, education was frequently presented as preparation for careers and leadership. For girls, education was often valued but sometimes framed as preparation for marriage, motherhood, or social refinement. Again, these patterns were not universal. Many families strongly supported their daughters' ambitions, but the broader cultural trend remained influential. As a result, talented young women sometimes received mixed messages. Work hard, study seriously, develop your abilities, but do not become too ambitious. Do not intimidate men. Do not neglect your future family responsibilities. The contradiction could be confusing. How does one pursue excellence while simultaneously being told not to pursue it too aggressively? Many women spent years navigating exactly that contradiction. And the contradiction extended beyond education. It appeared in employment as well. Women were encouraged to contribute economically when needed. Yet career advancement often remained limited. A woman could be praised for working hard while still being denied opportunities available to male colleagues. She could demonstrate skill and dedication while encountering invisible barriers. Some accepted these limitations as unavoidable. Others became increasingly frustrated by them. The frustration rarely appeared all at once. It accumulated slowly. Each overlooked promotion, each dismissive comment, each assumption about what women could or could not do. The accumulation mattered. History often focuses on major events. Elections, wars, court decisions, social movements, but everyday experiences shape people just as powerfully. And throughout the 1950s, countless women were accumulating experiences that challenged the dominant narrative of universal domestic happiness. The narrative remained strong. Magazines continued celebrating ideal families. Television continued presenting ideal households. Advertisers continued promoting ideal lifestyles. Yet real women continued living real lives. Messy lives. Complicated lives. Lives that did not always fit the script. Perhaps that is the most important truth about the decade. The famous image of the 1950s was never entirely false. Many families genuinely experienced prosperity and stability. Many women genuinely enjoyed the lives they built. The problem emerges when that image is treated as the complete story. It was only one story among many. Outside the frame existed women who remained single, women who pursued careers, women who felt trapped, women who challenged expectations, women who dreamed of different futures, women who loved their families while still longing for something more. Their experiences were just as real, yet they often received far less attention. As the decade approached its final years, the gap between public mythology and private reality continued to widen. Most people could not yet see the full significance of that gap. The lawns remained green. The neighborhoods remained orderly. The advertisements remained cheerful. The image remained intact. But underneath it, millions of individual experiences were quietly accumulating into something larger. Something that would eventually reshape conversations about womanhood, work, family, and freedom throughout the United States. The women who did not fit in were still being told to adapt, still being told to be grateful, still being told that happiness should come naturally if they followed the rules. Yet an increasing number were beginning to suspect that the rules themselves deserved closer examination. And once that suspicion takes root, it rarely disappears. And once that suspicion took root, many women found themselves looking backward as much as forward. They began examining their own lives, their younger selves, the choices they had made, the choices they had not made, the opportunities they had accepted, the opportunities they had abandoned. This kind of reflection often happened quietly. There was rarely a dramatic moment. Instead, it unfolded during ordinary evenings after children were asleep, during long drives, during afternoons when household chores were finally complete, moments when the noise of daily life faded and memory had room to speak. Some women remembered childhood ambitions with surprising clarity. The dream of becoming a doctor, a journalist, professor, an explorer, writer, scientist. Dreams that had once felt vivid and immediate. Dreams that had seemed entirely possible at 17, yet somehow distant at 37, or 47, or older. The realization could be unsettling, not because those women necessarily regretted their lives, but because they recognized how much of their decision-making had been shaped by expectations they never consciously chose. Many had followed paths that seemed natural because everyone around them followed similar paths. Marriage, motherhood, domestic responsibility. These choices were not inherently wrong. For many women, they brought genuine joy. The darker truth emerged when those choices were treated as obligations rather than options. A choice only remains a true choice when alternatives are realistically available. And throughout much of the 1950s, many alternatives remained difficult to access. Even women who pursued careers often encountered pressure to eventually prioritize home life. The assumption lingered almost everywhere. Work was temporary. Family was permanent. Ambition was acceptable, but only to a certain point. Cross that invisible line, and criticism often followed. The line itself was difficult to define. Everyone seemed to know it existed. Nobody could fully explain where it was. Yet women encountered it repeatedly. A woman who was confident could be admired. Too confident and she might be criticized. A woman who was successful could be respected. Too successful and some people became uncomfortable. A woman who expressed opinions could be appreciated. Too many opinions, and she risked being labeled difficult. The boundaries shifted constantly. That uncertainty made them particularly exhausting. Imagine trying to succeed while also monitoring whether your success might provoke disapproval. Imagine trying to express yourself while carefully calculating how much of yourself is socially acceptable. Many women became highly skilled at navigating these expectations. But the skill itself required effort, energy, attention, emotional labor. And over time, that effort could become draining. Another overlooked reality involved geography. The popular image of the 1950s often focuses on suburbs, but millions of women lived elsewhere, in cities, on farms, in small rural communities, in industrial towns. Their experiences varied enormously. A farm woman in Kansas faced different daily realities than a suburban mother in California. A factory worker in Detroit experienced life differently than a teacher in Boston. Yet despite these differences, many encountered similar expectations regarding gender roles. The details changed. The pressure often remained. Women were expected to place others first, expected to be accommodating, expected to support rather than lead, expected to nurture rather than direct. Again, none of these qualities are negative. Compassion and support are valuable human traits. The issue was that women were frequently expected to embody them almost exclusively. Other qualities, ambition, authority, independence, assertiveness, were often viewed more cautiously. This imbalance affected countless lives. And perhaps nowhere was the imbalance more visible than in the workplace. Imagine entering an office in the late 1950s. Rows of desks, typewriters clicking, telephones ringing, men occupying most leadership positions, women handling much of the administrative work. Of course, there were exceptions, but the pattern was common. Many women performed essential work while having limited opportunities to advance. Some employers openly assumed women would eventually leave to focus on family. Others believed leadership was naturally better suited to men. Such assumptions could shape careers before they even began. A talented woman might never receive opportunities equal to her abilities, not because she lacked competence, because expectations had already narrowed the possibilities. What makes these stories especially poignant is that many women internalized these limitations. If society repeatedly tells people that certain achievements are unrealistic, they often stop imagining those achievements altogether. The restriction becomes psychological as well as practical. Dreams shrink, goals adjust, possibilities narrow. And often the process happens so gradually that it is barely noticed. Years later, however, the consequences become visible. A woman looks back and wonders what might have happened under different circumstances. Not necessarily with bitterness. Sometimes simply with curiosity. Quiet question. A road not taken. A version of herself she never had the chance to become. These reflections became increasingly common as women reached middle age. The promises of youth had collided with the realities of adulthood. For some, the results were deeply satisfying. For others, they produced lingering uncertainty. And uncertainty itself was rarely acknowledged publicly. The culture preferred confidence, certainty, optimism. The image of the cheerful homemaker remained powerful precisely because it left little room for ambiguity. Yet ambiguity is part of real life. People often feel multiple emotions simultaneously. Gratitude and frustration, love and exhaustion, contentment and longing. These combinations are normal. The problem was that public narratives rarely reflected them. Women who experienced such complexity sometimes felt isolated simply because nobody seemed willing to discuss it honestly. By the end of the decade, however, that silence was becoming increasingly difficult to maintain. More women were attending universities. More women were entering the workforce. More women were reading widely. More women were comparing experiences. The private conversations that had once occurred in isolation were beginning to connect. Patterns were emerging. Women who had never met were reaching similar conclusions. Not because they shared identical lives, because they shared certain structural pressures. The realization was subtle. Yet historically, it was extremely significant. A person who believes a problem is unique often blames themselves. A person who recognizes a pattern begins asking different questions. Why does this keep happening? Who benefits from these expectations? Could things be different? Those questions were becoming more common. And although most Americans still viewed the 1950s as a period of stability and prosperity, a quieter transformation was already underway. Not in government buildings, not in television studios, not in newspaper headlines, but in living rooms. In kitchens, in classrooms, in offices, in the private thoughts of women who were gradually realizing that their struggles were connected to something much larger than themselves. The perfect image still stood, but its foundation was beginning to shift, slowly, almost invisibly, yet enough to change the future. The foundation was beginning to shift, but most people living through those years could not yet see how far the changes would eventually reach. That is one of the fascinating things about history. When we look backward, major transformations often seem obvious. When people are living through them, they usually do not. Life continues normally. Children grow up. Families move houses. Jobs begin and end. Birthdays come and go. The future hides itself inside ordinary days. For many women in the late 1950s, life still looked remarkably conventional from the outside. The routines remained familiar. Breakfast in the morning, errands during the day, family meals in the evening, church on Sunday, community events, school activities. Nothing dramatic appeared to be happening. Yet internally, many women were becoming more aware of the gap between expectation and reality. And awareness has a way of changing how people see everything around them. A woman who once accepted certain assumptions without question might suddenly begin noticing them everywhere. The magazine article advising women how to please their husbands. The advertisement suggesting that domestic perfection should be every woman's goal. The employer assuming that male workers deserve greater opportunities. The relative asking why an unmarried woman has not settled down. Comments that once seemed ordinary begin to feel different once they are viewed through a new lens. The words themselves have not changed. The perspective has. This process often begins quietly. A person notices one inconsistency, then another, then another. Eventually a pattern emerges. For many women, that pattern raised uncomfortable questions. If society claimed to value women so highly, why were their opportunities often restricted? If women's contributions were so important, why were so many contributions overlooked? If domestic life alone was supposed to satisfy everyone, why were so many intelligent and capable women privately questioning it? These questions did not always lead to immediate answers. Sometimes they led only to more questions. But questions matter. History repeatedly shows that social change often begins when people stop accepting familiar explanations and start examining them more closely. One particularly important area involved personal identity. The ideal woman of the 1950s was often presented as selfless. She cared for others, supported others, prioritized others. These qualities can be admirable. Most healthy communities depend upon people who care for one another. The difficulty emerged when women were expected to define themselves primarily through service to others. Many women began wondering where their own identities fit into the picture. Who were they beyond their roles? Beyond wife, beyond mother, beyond homemaker, beyond caretaker? The answers varied. Some discovered fulfillment through education, others through creative work, others through careers, others through civic involvement or volunteer activities. What united these experiences was the desire to be recognized as complete individuals rather than exclusively through relationships to others. That desire was not new. Women had expressed similar concerns throughout history. What made the late 1950s different was that larger numbers of women were beginning to articulate them simultaneously. The trend remained mostly invisible to the broader public. But beneath the surface it was growing. Another important factor was generational change. The daughters growing up during the 1950s were observing everything. Children absorb far more than adults sometimes realize. They watched how their mothers lived. They listened to conversations. They noticed frustrations. They observed inequalities. Some accepted these patterns as normal. Others did not. Young women entering adulthood near the end of the decade often possessed different expectations than previous generations. Many had greater access to education. Many had broader exposure to media. Many had encountered ideas that encouraged them to imagine alternative futures. This did not mean they rejected family life. Far from it. Most still expected marriage and children to play important roles. But increasing numbers wanted additional possibilities as well. The desire for more options was becoming harder to ignore. Meanwhile, the broader culture continued promoting certainty. Advertisements remained confident. Television remained optimistic. Public discussions often emphasized stability and prosperity. Yet beneath that confidence, many women experienced a different reality. A reality filled with contradictions. Society encouraged women to be intelligent, but not too ambitious. Attractive but not too independent. Capable but not too authoritative. Educated but not necessarily career-focused. The balancing act could be exhausting. Imagine spending years trying to meet expectations that constantly shift depending on circumstances. Too little confidence invites criticism. Too much confidence invites criticism. Too little ambition seems wasteful. Too much ambition seems threatening. The standards often felt impossible to satisfy completely. And when standards become impossible, people inevitably fall short. Not because they are inadequate, because the expectations themselves are contradictory. Many women sensed this intuitively long before they had language to describe it. They knew something felt unfair. They simply struggled to explain why. That struggle itself forms part of the dark truth, hidden beneath the decade's nostalgic image. The challenge was not merely that women faced limitations. The challenge was that many limitations appeared natural. When expectations become deeply embedded in culture, people stop noticing them. They seem inevitable, normal, common sense. Questioning them can feel almost strange. Yet history is full of examples where supposedly natural arrangements later proved neither natural nor inevitable. The 1950s were no exception. As more women reflected on their experiences, some began recognizing that many assumptions about gender roles were products of culture rather than destiny. That realization opened new possibilities. If expectations are created by society, perhaps they can change. If opportunities are restricted by custom, perhaps customs can evolve. Such ideas remained controversial in some circles. Many Americans genuinely believed traditional arrangements provided stability and happiness. For countless families they did. The issue was not whether traditional roles could be fulfilling. The issue was whether they should be mandatory. Whether every woman should be expected to follow the same path regardless of her talents, interests, or aspirations. Increasingly, women were beginning to challenge that assumption. Quietly at first, carefully, sometimes only within their own thoughts. But even private doubts can become powerful over time. The women who did not fit in were discovering something important. Their differences did not necessarily indicate personal failure. Their dissatisfaction did not necessarily indicate weakness. Their ambitions did not necessarily indicate selfishness. Perhaps they simply wanted lives that reflected who they actually were. That possibility sounds simple. Yet during the 1950s, it carried profound implications. Because once people begin believing they deserve the freedom to define themselves, they become far less willing to accept definitions imposed by others. And that belief was spreading, slowly, patiently, from one conversation to another, from one woman to another, from one generation to the next. The changes remained largely invisible to outsiders. The neighborhood still looked orderly. The magazines still looked cheerful. The image of the perfect 1950s woman remained firmly in place. But beneath that image, more and more women were beginning to imagine lives that extended beyond it. And imagination, once awakened, is very difficult to contain. And imagination was precisely what many women had been taught to limit. Not completely, not openly, but carefully. A young girl could imagine a happy future. She could imagine a family, beautiful home, children, community respect. those dreams were encouraged. Other dreams sometimes received a different response. A dream of leading a company, a dream of becoming a judge, a dream of conducting scientific research, a dream of influencing national policy, a dream of living independently without marriage. These possibilities were not impossible. Women achieved remarkable things even during the 1950s. But such ambitions often required pushing against expectations that many people never had to confront. The resistance was not always dramatic. In fact, some of the most powerful barriers were surprisingly ordinary. A teacher steering a girl toward a more appropriate career. A parent expressing concern about excessive ambition. An employer assuming that marriage would eventually end a woman's professional goals. Community viewing independence as unusual. Small moments, small assumptions, small limitations, repeated thousands of times across millions of lives. The cumulative effect was enormous. What makes this period particularly difficult to understand from a modern perspective is that many restrictions were wrapped in kindness. Women were often told these expectations existed for their own benefit. Marriage would make them happy. Domestic life would fulfill them. Traditional roles would protect them. And for some women, these predictions proved true. The challenge was that society frequently treated one path as universally correct. Human beings rarely fit universal formulas. People differ. Their desires differ. Their talents differ. Their personalities differ. The women who did not fit in were often discovering this simple truth through personal experience. And experience can be a powerful teacher. Imagine a woman who followed every expectation. She married, raised children, maintained a beautiful home, supported her family, did everything society encouraged her to do. Yet years later she still feels restless, still feels incomplete, still feels as though part of herself remains unexplored. What conclusion is she supposed to reach? For a long time, many women assumed the fault must lie within themselves. Perhaps they were ungrateful. Perhaps they expected too much. Perhaps they simply needed to try harder. But gradually, another possibility began emerging. Perhaps the problem was not individual failure. Perhaps the problem was the belief that one life pattern could satisfy everyone. This realization appears again and again in historical accounts from women reflecting on the era. Many described feeling as though they were living according to scripts written by others. Scripts that seemed sensible. Scripts that earned approval. Scripts that provided structure. Yet scripts nonetheless. The more closely they examined their lives, the more they wondered how many decisions had been genuinely theirs, and how many had simply been expected. These reflections often intensified during middle age. By that stage, major life choices had already been made. Careers established or abandoned. Families formed. Responsibilities accumulated. The future looked different than it had at 20. There was less time to postpone questions. Less time to assume that unexplored possibilities could always wait. For some women, this realization brought renewed determination. They returned to school. They pursued creative projects. They entered the workforce. They sought opportunities that had once seemed inaccessible. Others continued living much as before but viewed their circumstances differently. The important change was not always external. Sometimes it was internal. A shift in understanding. A refusal to interpret every frustration as personal inadequacy. That shift may sound small. Historically, it was significant, because changing how people interpret their experiences often changes what they believe is possible. Meanwhile, American society itself was evolving. The nation entering the 1960s was not identical to the nation that had entered the 1950s. Economic growth had transformed communities. Technology had changed communication. Education levels had risen. Cultural influences had expanded. The younger generation increasingly encountered ideas that challenged older assumptions. The world was becoming more interconnected. And with greater exposure came greater comparison. Women could see examples of different lives, different possibilities, different choices. The old certainties no longer seemed quite as certain. At the same time, the gap between public image and private reality continued widening. The famous photographs remained. The advertisements remained. The idealized vision of suburban domestic life remained. Yet beneath that image, countless individual stories told a more complicated tale. A talented woman denied advancement. A creative woman struggling to find time for her work. A single woman facing constant social pressure. A divorced woman navigating judgment. A woman trapped in an unhappy marriage because alternatives seemed financially impossible. A woman questioning expectations she had never chosen. None of these stories fit comfortably into the popular narrative, yet they were part of the reality. Perhaps that is what makes the decade so fascinating. The contrast. The distance between appearance and experience. From the outside, the 1950s often appear calm, orderly, and predictable. From the inside, many lives were far more complex. And complexity rarely photographs well. Camera captures smiles. Cannot easily capture doubt. Captures tidy living rooms. It cannot capture the thoughts keeping someone awake at night. Captures celebrations. It rarely captures private disappointments. This is why historians often spend so much time examining letters, diaries, interviews, and personal recollections. The official story of an era tells only part of the truth. The rest often lives in private memories. And when historians began listening carefully to women who lived through the 1950s, they heard stories that complicated the nostalgic image many people preferred. Not stories of universal misery. Not stories of universal happiness. Stories of real human beings. Women who experienced joy and frustration. Security and limitation. Love and loneliness. Gratitude and regret. Sometimes all at the same time. Those stories revealed something important. The women who did not fit in were not unusual exceptions. They were part of a much larger reality. A reality that had remained partially hidden beneath decades of cultural mythology. As the 1950s moved toward their conclusion, that hidden reality was becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. The questions women had carried privately for years were beginning to reach broader audiences. The conversations were becoming more frequent. The doubts more visible. The assumptions more vulnerable. And although few people could yet predict exactly what would happen next, the foundations of the old consensus were steadily weakening. The image remained intact, but the certainty behind it was beginning to fade. The certainty was fading, but it did not disappear overnight. In fact, one reason the 1950s remained so fascinating is that two realities existed side by side. One reality was the public image. The image of stability. The image of prosperity. The image of happy families gathered around dinner tables in neatly maintained homes. For many people, that image reflected genuine experiences. The post-war years brought opportunities that previous generations could scarcely imagine. Millions of families owned homes for the first time. Consumer goods became widely available. Children often enjoyed greater material comfort than their parents had known. These achievements were real. Yet alongside that reality existed another, quieter reality, a more complicated reality. A reality where many women found themselves asking difficult questions that public culture rarely acknowledged. The contrast between these two realities helps explain why memories of the decade often differ so dramatically. Some people remember security. Others remember restriction. Some remember optimism. Others remember pressure. Both perspectives can be true at the same time. History is rarely as simple as nostalgia suggests. Take, for example, the question of respect. Women in the 1950s were frequently praised. Society spoke about mothers with admiration. Wives were described as essential to family life. Homemakers were celebrated as guardians of the household. On the surface, this appears highly respectful. And in many ways it was. But respect becomes complicated when it depends upon fulfilling specific expectations. What happened when a woman chose a different path? What happened when she remained unmarried? What happened when she prioritized a career? What happened when she rejected traditional assumptions entirely? The admiration often became less certain, the approval less automatic, the support less enthusiastic. This revealed an important truth. Many women were respected not simply because they were women. They were respected because they fit a particular model of womanhood. Those who stepped outside that model frequently encountered a different response. Sometimes the consequences were mild. Sometimes they were significant. But they were rarely absent. Consider how often women were expected to explain choices that men rarely needed to explain. A man pursuing a demanding career was often viewed as ambitious. A woman pursuing the same goal might be asked how she planned to balance family responsibilities. A man remaining unmarried might be considered independent. A woman remaining unmarried might face questions about why she had not settled down. A man focused intensely on professional success could be admired. A woman doing the same might be viewed with suspicion. These double standards were not universal. Not every community enforced them equally. Yet they appeared often enough to influence countless lives. And because they were so common, many people barely noticed them. The expectations blended into everyday life. They became part of the background, part of what seemed normal. That normality made them particularly powerful. People rarely challenge assumptions they cannot see. One of the most striking aspects of the period is how many women adapted themselves to fit expectations, even when those expectations felt uncomfortable. Human beings are social creatures. Belonging matters. Acceptance matters. Approval matters. Most people prefer fitting in to standing apart. The women who did not fit in often faced a difficult choice: suppress important parts of themselves, or risk criticism. Neither option was attractive. Many chose a middle path. They complied outwardly while preserving private dreams. They fulfilled expected roles while quietly nurturing personal ambitions. They appeared conventional while internally questioning convention. This balancing act required tremendous energy, and it often remained invisible. Friends might never notice. Neighbors might never suspect. Even family members sometimes remained unaware. Yet beneath the surface, these internal negotiations shaped daily life. The effort of constantly adjusting oneself to meet expectations can be exhausting. Many women carried that exhaustion silently. Another overlooked aspect of the decade involved loneliness. Popular images of the 1950s emphasized community. And indeed, many communities were close-knit. But loneliness can exist even in crowded environments. A woman might spend all day surrounded by people and still feel profoundly alone if she believed nobody understood her experiences. This was particularly true for women whose aspirations differed from accepted norms. A woman who wanted a career beyond what society expected. A woman questioning traditional assumptions. A woman feeling trapped by circumstances. Such women often struggled to find spaces where they could speak honestly. The isolation could be emotional rather than physical. And emotional isolation has a unique weight. Imagine carrying thoughts you feel unable to share. Imagine believing that expressing those thoughts might invite judgment. Imagine hearing everyone around you praise a system that seems to be causing your unhappiness. The loneliness could become intense. Yet because it remained largely invisible, it rarely attracted public attention. At the same time, important changes were beginning to occur beneath the surface of American life. Universities expanded. Books circulated new ideas. Social movements challenged long-standing assumptions. The nation was becoming increasingly difficult to contain within old categories. Women were part of these developments. They read, they studied, they discussed, they observed, and increasingly they connected personal experiences to larger social patterns. This connection was crucial. For years, many women interpreted their frustrations as individual problems. Now some were beginning to see those frustrations differently. Perhaps they were not isolated incidents. Perhaps they reflected broader expectations affecting millions of women. The realization was powerful because it transformed private discomfort into public significance. A problem affecting one person might be dismissed. A problem affecting millions becomes harder to ignore. Yet even at the end of the 1950s, most of this transformation remained hidden from view. The famous image of the decade still dominated public memory. The smiling advertisements, the polished neighborhoods, the carefully maintained households. These images continued shaping how people understood the era. What they often failed to show were the women who existed beyond the frame. The women whose lives did not fit neatly into the picture. The women who felt restless. The women who felt overlooked. The women who wanted choices that society rarely discussed. The women who quietly questioned expectations that others accepted without hesitation. Those women were not necessarily rebels. Many were ordinary people living ordinary lives. What made them different was not their behavior. It was their awareness. Their growing recognition that the world around them offered a narrower definition of womanhood than many were willing to accept. That recognition would not remain private forever. It was slowly spreading. From conversations to communities. From experiences to ideas. From individual lives to broader cultural change. The process was gradual, but history often moves that way. Not through sudden explosions. Through countless small shifts occurring simultaneously. And by the close of the decade, those shifts were becoming impossible to ignore. The women who did not fit in had spent years adapting themselves to the expectations of others. Now, increasingly, they were beginning to ask a different question. What if the expectations were the problem? What if the expectations were the problem? For many women, that question felt almost shocking. Not because it was complicated, because it challenged assumptions that had surrounded them for most of their lives. From childhood onward, they had heard similar messages. A good woman behaves this way. A successful woman wants these things. A respectable woman follows this path. These ideas appeared so frequently that they often seemed unquestionable. Questioning them could feel like questioning reality itself. Yet once the question appeared, it tended to remain. And it had a way of changing how women interpreted their past. Experiences that once seemed isolated began fitting together differently. The promotion that never came. The ambition that was discouraged. The opinions that were dismissed. The opportunities that quietly disappeared. The constant pressure to place personal aspirations second. Viewed separately, these moments seemed small. Viewed together, they formed a pattern. Patterns matter because they reveal structures that individuals often struggle to see. A woman might blame herself for one disappointment. Blaming herself for dozens becomes much harder. Eventually, some began recognizing that the obstacles they faced were not entirely personal. Many were cultural. Embedded within expectations so familiar that most people rarely examined them. One striking example involved authority. Throughout much of the 1950s, women frequently exercised enormous responsibility. They managed households, raised children, handled family finances, organized communities, volunteered in civic organizations, supported schools and churches. The amount of work was substantial. The amount of influence was often significant. Yet formal authority frequently remained concentrated elsewhere. Men occupied most positions of political power, most corporate leadership roles, most high-ranking professional positions. The contradiction was difficult to ignore. Women were trusted with tremendous responsibilities inside certain boundaries. Outside those boundaries, trust often became less certain. The message was subtle but persistent. Leadership was acceptable in some forms, less acceptable in others. For women who naturally possessed leadership abilities, this contradiction could be frustrating. They knew they were capable. Others often knew it too. Yet opportunities did not always reflect that reality. Many adapted. Many persevered. Many succeeded despite obstacles. But the obstacles themselves remained. And over time, increasing numbers of women began noticing them. Another important reality involved boredom. Boredom is rarely discussed in historical narratives. Sounds too ordinary, too trivial. Yet boredom can profoundly shape human lives. Imagine performing the same tasks every day with little variation. Imagine feeling intellectually unstimulated despite possessing curiosity and ability. Imagine wanting challenges that never arrive. Some women experienced exactly that. Again, not because domestic work lacked value. Maintaining a household requires effort and skill. The issue was that some women desired additional forms of fulfillment. Creative fulfillment, professional fulfillment, intellectual fulfillment. The culture often assumed that domestic life alone should satisfy those needs. For some women it did. For others it did not. The mismatch created tension. And that tension frequently remained hidden because boredom carried a certain stigma. How could someone be bored while living the dream? How could someone feel restless while enjoying comforts unavailable to previous generations? The questions themselves often discouraged honest discussion. Many women felt guilty even acknowledging their dissatisfaction. The guilt compounded the problem. Instead of addressing the source of their feelings, they often tried to suppress them. Yet suppressed feelings rarely disappear. They wait. They return. They accumulate. As the years passed, accumulation became increasingly important. Not only for individual women but for society as a whole. Because millions of private experiences were gradually creating a broader cultural shift. One woman questioning expectations might seem insignificant. Millions doing so becomes historically significant. And by the end of the 1950s, that process was well underway. The women who did not fit in were no longer isolated exceptions. They represented a substantial portion of the population. Some questioned gender roles. Some questioned workplace limitations. Some questioned assumptions about marriage. Some questioned expectations surrounding motherhood. Others questioned all of these things simultaneously. The specifics varied. The underlying theme remained consistent. A growing desire for greater freedom to define one's own life. That desire was not necessarily radical. Many women did not want to reject traditional roles entirely. Many simply wanted alternatives. The freedom to choose. The freedom to combine family life with other aspirations. The freedom to determine success according to personal values rather than social expectations. Such requests may seem modest, yet they challenge deeply rooted assumptions. And deeply rooted assumptions rarely change easily. Resistance remained strong. Many Americans sincerely believed traditional gender roles provided stability and happiness. Some women agreed. Some did not. The debate was becoming increasingly visible. What makes this moment in history especially interesting is that the future remained uncertain. People living through the late 1950s could not see what historians see now. They did not know how dramatically discussions about women, work, education, marriage, and equality would evolve during the following decades. They simply knew that something felt unsettled. Something was changing. The old answers no longer satisfied everyone. The old certainties no longer convinced everyone. The old expectations no longer fit everyone. That realization was spreading quietly through homes, workplaces, schools, and communities across the country. Meanwhile, popular culture continued projecting confidence. Advertisements still promised happiness. Television still celebrated domestic harmony. Public images still suggested that everything was working exactly as intended. But beneath those images, reality remained far more complicated. The women who did not fit in continued navigating lives that rarely appeared in glossy magazines. Lives filled with compromises. Lives filled with questions. lives filled with ambitions that often existed beyond society's approved boundaries. Some found ways to pursue those ambitions. Others postponed them. Others abandoned them. Each story was different, yet together they revealed something important. The dark truth about women who did not fit in during the 1950s was not that they were failures, not that they were selfish, not that they were ungrateful. It was that many lived in a culture that often struggled to imagine women as fully independent individuals with diverse dreams, talents, and desires. And once that truth became visible, it became increasingly difficult to ignore. Because every question led to another question. Every doubt led to another doubt. And every woman who recognized the pattern made it slightly harder for the old story to survive unchanged. The surface still looked calm, but beneath it, the current was growing stronger. The current was growing stronger, even if most people could not yet measure its strength. That is often how change begins. Quietly, gradually, almost invisibly. People continue living their ordinary lives, unaware that the assumptions guiding those lives are slowly being reconsidered. For the women who did not fit in, this period could feel strange. On one hand, the pressure to conform remained powerful. On the other, more evidence appeared every year that alternatives were possible. The contradiction created both hope and frustration. Hope because possibilities seemed to be expanding. Frustration because the expansion was often painfully slow. Imagine being a woman with exceptional ability in the late 1950s. You know what you can do. You know what you want to accomplish. You see opportunities that interest you. Yet at every stage, someone questions whether those ambitions are appropriate. Not necessarily impossible, just inappropriate. The distinction matters. Being told something cannot be done is one obstacle. Being told it should not be done is another. The second often works more effectively because it targets identity rather than capability. Many women spent years confronting exactly this challenge. The issue was rarely competence. The issue was expectation. A woman might be fully capable of leadership. The question became whether society was comfortable seeing her lead. A woman might be fully capable of professional success. The question became whether people believed she should pursue it. These questions shaped careers, relationships, and life decisions across the decade. And because the pressure was often social rather than legal, it could be difficult to identify clearly. There was no single rule to point toward. No single institution to blame. Instead, expectations appeared everywhere. In conversations, in advertisements, in schools, in workplaces, in family traditions. They formed a network of assumptions reinforcing one another. The network could feel impossible to escape. Yet some women found ways to push against it. Not through dramatic rebellion, through persistence. One of the most remarkable aspects of this history is how many women quietly expanded opportunities without receiving widespread recognition. A woman earned advanced qualifications despite discouragement. A woman entered a profession dominated by men. A woman continued working after marriage. A woman delayed marriage entirely. A woman pursued creative work despite limited support. These actions may seem ordinary today. In the context of the 1950s, they often required considerable determination. Each individual choice challenged assumptions about what women could or should do. And every challenge, no matter how small, widened the path for others. Still, progress came with costs. Women who stepped outside accepted roles frequently encountered criticism, sometimes openly, sometimes subtly. A woman devoted to her career might be accused of neglecting family values. A woman who remained unmarried might face constant questions. A woman expressing strong opinions might be viewed as unfeminine. The labels varied. The underlying message remained similar. Difference carried consequences. The desire to avoid those consequences kept many women silent. Silence itself became part of the story. History often remembers people who speak publicly. Yet countless women experienced these struggles privately. They adapted outwardly while carrying inner conflicts that nobody else could fully see. The hidden nature of those conflicts contributed to one of the greatest misconceptions about the decade. The misconception that widespread silence indicated widespread satisfaction. Silence and satisfaction are not the same thing. People remain silent for many reasons. Fear of judgment, desire for acceptance, lack of language, lack of support, uncertainty about whether others share their experiences. Many women remained silent because they believed nobody else felt the same way. As more conversations occurred, that belief began weakening. The realization that others shared similar concerns was often transformative. A woman might spend years assuming her frustrations were unusual. Then she hears a friend express nearly identical thoughts. Suddenly, the experience looks different. The problem no longer appears entirely personal. It begins to look social, and social problems invite social solutions. This shift in perspective would eventually become one of the most important developments of the era. But during the late 1950s and early 1960s, it remained in its early stages. The process was still unfolding. Many women were only beginning to recognize patterns they had previously interpreted as isolated incidents. Meanwhile, younger generations were growing up in a changing world. Daughters observed their mothers carefully. Some admired traditional roles and hoped to follow them. Others noticed limitations their mothers rarely discussed openly. Children often perceive more than adults realize. They saw sacrifices. They saw frustrations. They saw ambitions left unexplored. These observations influenced how the next generation imagined its future. The significance of this cannot be overstated. Cultural expectations survive when they are accepted by each new generation. When younger people begin questioning them, change becomes more likely. And questions were becoming increasingly common. Why should intelligence be limited by gender? Why should opportunities depend upon traditional assumptions? Why should one life path be treated as superior to all others? These questions did not produce immediate answers, but they steadily eroded confidence in the old certainties. One reason the 1950s continue to attract so much attention today is that they are often remembered selectively. Popular memory tends to preserve the polished images, the smiling families, tidy neighborhoods, the apparent simplicity. Those images are real. They represent genuine aspects of the era. The problem arises when they become the entire story. Because beyond those images existed women whose experiences looked very different. Women who felt invisible. Women who felt constrained. Women who felt pressured to become versions of themselves that pleased others. Women who succeeded despite barriers. Women who quietly questioned expectations that seemed immovable. Their stories reveal a more complete picture. Not a darker picture alone. A more human one. A picture containing contradictions. Success and disappointment. Security and restriction. Belonging and isolation. Comfort and frustration. All existing side by side. Perhaps that complexity explains why the decade remained so fascinating. The 1950s were neither a perfect golden age nor a period of universal oppression. They were a time when millions of women navigated expectations that fit some lives comfortably and fit others poorly. The women who did not fit in often paid a price. Sometimes socially, sometimes professionally, sometimes emotionally, and often in ways that remained invisible to everyone except themselves. Yet their experiences mattered, because the questions they asked would not disappear. The doubts they voiced would not vanish. The possibilities they imagined would continue expanding. What began as private reflections in kitchens, classrooms, offices, and living rooms was gradually becoming something larger. A growing recognition that women deserved the freedom to define their own lives rather than simply inherit definitions created by others. And once that recognition begins spreading through a society, the future rarely remains the same. The future was already beginning to change, even though many people still believed they were living in a world that would remain largely the same forever. That belief is understandable. Every generation tends to assume that the social order surrounding them is more permanent than it really is. The customs of the moment feel natural. The expectations feel timeless. The rules feel fixed. Yet history repeatedly demonstrates that social norms are often far less stable than they appear. The women who did not fit in during the 1950s were helping reveal exactly that. Not necessarily through organized movements. Not yet. Often simply through the act of existing. Through living lives that challenged assumptions. Through refusing, quietly or openly, to fit into a single approved category. Their presence alone complicated the popular story of the decade. Because every woman who chose a different path forced society to confront a difficult reality. There was no single way to be a woman. The idea sounds obvious today. At the time, it carried significant implications. If women were genuinely different from one another in their goals, talents, personalities, and ambitions, then a universal model of womanhood became much harder to defend. And that was precisely the problem facing the cultural ideal of the 1950s. The ideal depended upon uniformity. Real women provided diversity. The gap between those two things continued widening. Consider how often women were expected to prioritize harmony over honesty. In many situations, maintaining social peace mattered more than expressing disagreement. A woman might smile politely when she actually felt frustrated. She might accept advice she never requested. She might avoid conversations that could create conflict. Over time, this habit became deeply ingrained. Many women became experts at reading rooms, managing emotions, and avoiding tension. These skills had value, but they also carried costs. When people spend years suppressing parts of themselves, they sometimes lose touch with what they genuinely want. Their own desires become difficult to identify beneath layers of expectation. Imagine being asked throughout your life what others need from you. Now imagine rarely being asked what you need from yourself. The difference is significant. Many women found themselves confronting exactly this issue, particularly as they reached middle age. Children grew older. Responsibilities shifted. Life slowed enough to allow reflection. And reflection often produced uncomfortable questions. Who am I when nobody needs something from me? What goals belong to me alone? What parts of myself have been neglected? For some women, the answers were exciting. For others, they were painful. Both responses reflected the same reality. A life organized entirely around external expectations can leave surprisingly little room for personal exploration. The women who did not fit in often sensed this long before they had language to explain it. Another revealing aspect of the era involved success itself. Society offered women a very specific definition of success. A successful marriage. A successful household. Successful children. These achievements mattered deeply. And many women pursued them with genuine dedication. But what happened when a woman defined success differently? What happened when she wanted recognition for intellectual achievements, professional accomplishments, creative contributions, public leadership, scientific discovery? The culture often struggled with these questions, not because women lacked ability. History provides abundant evidence to the contrary. The struggle centered on expectations. People frequently evaluated women according to standards that differed from those applied to men. As a result, women who achieved extraordinary things sometimes found their accomplishments treated as secondary to their personal lives. A successful man might be known for his career. A successful woman might still be asked primarily about her family. The imbalance was subtle, yet it revealed how deeply traditional assumptions remained embedded in public thinking. For women who did not fit comfortably into those assumptions, the experience could feel profoundly unfair. And fairness matters. People can tolerate many hardships. They tolerate unfairness far less willingly once they recognize it. Recognition was becoming increasingly common. Partly because education continued expanding. Partly because communication continued improving. Partly because women were comparing experiences more frequently than before. The comparison process proved especially important. Many frustrations feel personal until people discover they are shared. Then those frustrations begin looking like patterns. And patterns invite investigation. Why do so many women describe similar experiences? Why do similar obstacles appear across different communities? Why do the same frustrations emerge in different regions? Questions like these encouraged broader thinking. They shifted attention away from individual shortcomings and toward social structures. The shift did not happen everywhere at once. Many women remained content within traditional roles. Many communities strongly supported existing expectations. The point is not that everyone rejected the old model. The point is that increasing numbers no longer accepted it as the only model. That distinction changed everything. Because once alternatives become visible, conformity becomes harder to enforce. A woman who believes no alternatives exist often adapts. A woman who sees alternatives begins making choices. Choice itself became one of the central issues emerging from the experiences of women who did not fit in. Many were not demanding identical lives. They were demanding options. The freedom to choose careers without stigma. The freedom to remain single without judgment. The freedom to combine family and professional ambitions. The freedom to define fulfillment individually. These aspirations sound remarkably reasonable. Yet they challenged assumptions that had shaped society for generations. The challenge was not always welcomed. Resistance remained strong. Some people feared social change would weaken families. Others believed traditional roles protected social stability. Still others simply preferred familiar arrangements. The debate would continue for years. But by the close of the 1950s, one fact was becoming increasingly difficult to deny. The famous image of the perfectly content 1950s woman represented only part of the story. Outside that image existed millions of women whose experiences were more complicated, more varied, more contradictory, more human. Women who loved their families yet wanted more opportunities. Women who appreciated stability yet questioned limitations. Women who followed expectations while privately doubting them. Women who openly challenged them. These women had always existed. What was changing was visibility. Their experiences were becoming harder to ignore. Their voices were becoming harder to dismiss. And the questions they raised were beginning to reach audiences far beyond private conversations. The transformation remained incomplete. The old expectations remained powerful. The old images remained influential. Yet something fundamental had shifted. The women who did not fit in were no longer simply adapting to the world around them. Increasingly, they were beginning to imagine how the world itself might change. Increasingly, they were beginning to imagine how the world itself might change. That shift, from adapting to imagining, was one of the most important developments in the lives of women who did not fit into the expectations of the 1950s. For years, many had focused on adjustment. How do I fit in? How do I avoid criticism? How do I meet expectations? How do I make this work? These questions dominated countless private thoughts. But once people begin imagining alternatives, the questions change. Why must things remain this way? Could life be organized differently? Could opportunities be distributed differently? Could future generations experience something better? The difference between those two sets of questions may seem small. Historically, it is enormous. One accepts the boundaries. The other examines them. And boundaries often appear strongest just before people begin testing them. For many women, the testing happened gradually. A decision to return to school. A decision to continue working after marriage. A decision to pursue creative interests more seriously. A decision to reject assumptions that no longer felt convincing. These actions rarely attracted national attention. Yet together they represented something significant. Women were beginning to claim greater ownership over their own lives. Not all at once, not without resistance, but steadily. The resistance itself revealed how much was at stake. When social expectations are deeply rooted, even modest challenges can provoke strong reactions. A woman who prioritized a career might face criticism. A woman delaying marriage might encounter concern. A woman openly questioning traditional roles might be viewed as troublesome. Such reactions often revealed less about the women themselves than about the anxiety surrounding change. Because change introduces uncertainty, and uncertainty makes many people uncomfortable. The 1950s had been an era that prized certainty. Clear roles, clear expectations, clear definitions. The women who did not fit in complicated those definitions. Their lives demonstrated that reality was more diverse than the cultural ideal suggested. And diversity is difficult to reduce to a single narrative. Consider the experiences of educated women during this period. Many had spent years developing knowledge and skills. They had studied literature, science, history, mathematics, languages, and countless other subjects. Education encouraged curiosity, critical thinking, independent judgment. Yet after graduation, many encountered environments where those abilities were not always fully utilized. The contradiction could be striking. Society invested in educating women while simultaneously limiting some of the opportunities available to them. Not everywhere, not in every profession, but often enough to become a recurring theme. For some women, the result was frustration. For others, determination. Many refused to let their education go unused. They found ways to contribute through teaching, writing, community leadership, volunteer work, and professional careers. Still, the fact remained that numerous doors opened more easily for men than for women. And every closed door encouraged new questions. Questions about fairness. Questions about potential. Questions about wasted talent. Wasted talent became one of the most overlooked aspects of the era. History often focuses on people who achieved remarkable things. Less attention is given to those who never received the opportunity. How many brilliant scientists never entered laboratories? How many gifted leaders never held positions of authority? How many talented writers never found time to write? How many innovators never had the chance to innovate? No historian can answer those questions precisely. The losses are impossible to measure. That uncertainty itself forms part of the dark truth. When opportunities are restricted, society rarely sees only the visible consequences. It also loses countless invisible possibilities. Lives that might have unfolded differently. Contributions that never emerged. Talents that remained dormant. The women who did not fit in often sensed this personally. They understood what it felt like to possess abilities that the world seemed uncertain how to accommodate. Some persevered anyway. Others redirected their talents into areas considered more acceptable. Others quietly abandoned ambitions altogether. Each response carried its own costs. At the same time, changing economic realities were influencing expectations. Consumer culture expanded rapidly during the post-war years. Families purchased homes, appliances, automobiles, televisions, and other goods that symbolized success. The ideal household became increasingly tied to consumption. Women often stood at the center of this system. Advertisements targeted them constantly. Manufacturers promoted products promising efficiency, beauty, convenience, and happiness. The message appeared everywhere. Buy the right appliance. Use the right detergent. Serve the right meals. Create the right home. The implication was clear. A woman's success could be measured through domestic perfection. For many women, these products genuinely improved daily life. Household technology reduced certain forms of labor. But technology did not solve deeper questions about identity. A modern washing machine could save time. Could not answer questions about purpose. A new kitchen could provide convenience. It could not resolve feelings of limitation. Yet popular culture often blurred these distinctions. Material comfort was frequently presented as a solution to problems that were emotional, intellectual, or social in nature. For women whose struggles involved identity and opportunity, such solutions rarely felt complete. The mismatch contributed to a growing sense that something important remained unaddressed. By the end of the decade, increasing numbers of women recognized this feeling. Not always clearly, not always consistently, but enough to notice, enough to talk about, enough to compare experiences. And comparison continued producing the same result. Women discovered that many private frustrations were surprisingly common. The realization reduced isolation. It reduced self-blame. And perhaps most importantly, it created solidarity. Not necessarily organized solidarity. Not yet. But the beginnings of shared understanding. A recognition that personal experiences connected to larger social patterns. That recognition would become increasingly powerful as time passed. Because once people understand that they are not alone, they often become more willing to speak openly. An open conversation changes things. Ideas spread. Assumptions are challenged. Alternatives become visible. Possibilities expand. The women who did not fit in had spent years feeling as though they existed at the edges of accepted society. Gradually, they were discovering that the edges contained far more people than anyone had imagined. The cultural ideal remained influential. The magazines still celebrated it. The advertisements still promoted it. The television programs still reflected it. Yet reality continued refusing to fit neatly inside the frame. Real women remained more diverse than the ideal allowed. More ambitious, more independent, more complicated, more human. And with every passing year, that reality became a little harder to hide. The image remained polished, but the questions beneath it were growing louder. The questions beneath the polished image were growing louder, though often only in whispers. Whispers between friends. Whispers between sisters. Whispers during long conversations after children had gone to bed. Whispers exchanged over coffee tables, in neighborhood gatherings, and in letters sent across states. The conversations rarely began with grand declarations. They often started with simple observations. Do you ever feel like something is missing? Did you ever want something different? Do you ever wonder what your life would have been like? Questions like these carried surprising weight. Because once spoken aloud, they revealed that private doubts were not always private. Other women had wondered the same things. Other women had felt the same restlessness. Other women had experienced the same quiet conflict between expectation and desire. For years, many had believed they were alone. Now that belief was beginning to weaken. And loneliness loses some of its power when people discover they are not isolated. This realization did not solve every problem. Far from it. The practical barriers remained. Workplace inequalities remained. Social expectations remained. Financial dependence remained a reality for many women. Marriage laws and employment practices still reflected assumptions built over generations. Yet understanding matters. People often endure difficult circumstances differently once they recognize those circumstances as shared experiences rather than personal failures. The women who did not fit in were increasingly reaching that point. One important reason was the growing visibility of contradiction. The 1950s celebrated individuality in many ways. Americans admired innovation, entrepreneurship, personal initiative, independence. These qualities occupied a central place in national identity. Yet women frequently encountered limits when expressing those same qualities. A man pursuing independence was often admired. A woman pursuing independence could face suspicion. A man building a career was seen as ambitious. A woman building a career sometimes had to justify her choices. The inconsistency became harder to ignore. Why should qualities celebrated in one group become controversial in another? Questions like this gained strength because they appealed to widely accepted values. Women were not necessarily asking for entirely new principles. Many were asking for equal access to principles society already claimed to value. The desire for opportunity, the desire for self-determination, the desire to pursue one's talents. These ideas resonated deeply within American culture. That resonance gave them power. Meanwhile, many women continued living lives that appeared successful from the outside. This distinction is important. The dark truth about women who did not fit in is often misunderstood. It is sometimes assumed that their lives were miserable. Many were not. Many women experienced love, friendship, stability, and meaningful achievements. The issue was not universal unhappiness. The issue was limitation. The issue was the gap between what was possible and what was permitted, encouraged, or expected. A woman could have a good life and still feel constrained. A woman could love her family and still wish for greater opportunities. A woman could appreciate her community and still question its assumptions. Human experiences rarely fit simple categories. The women of the 1950s were no exception. Their stories contain contradictions because real lives contain contradictions. That complexity often disappears in nostalgic accounts of the era. Nostalgia tends to simplify, highlights comforting memories, smooths rough edges, creates coherence. History is usually messier, and the closer historians look, the more complexity they find. One particularly revealing area involved personal finances. Many women lacked complete economic independence. Even in stable marriages, financial decisions often reflected traditional assumptions about authority and responsibility. Some women had little direct control over money. Others had more influence but still faced limitations. The specifics varied enormously from family to family. Yet economic dependence remained a significant reality. This mattered because independence is often easier to exercise when financial options exist. Without options, choices become narrower. The consequences could be profound. A woman dissatisfied with her circumstances might find change difficult simply because she lacked practical alternatives. An unhappy marriage could feel impossible to leave. An unfulfilling life could feel impossible to redesign. The restrictions were not always emotional. Sometimes they were economic. Sometimes they were structural. And structural barriers often persist regardless of individual determination. This reality explains why some women felt trapped despite possessing remarkable intelligence and capability. Ability alone does not guarantee opportunity. History demonstrates this repeatedly. Opportunities depend upon social conditions as much as personal talent. By the close of the decade, more women were recognizing this connection. Their frustrations increasingly pointed beyond individual situations toward broader systems. Why are these opportunities unavailable? Why do these expectations exist? Who benefits from maintaining them? The questions reflected a growing willingness to examine society itself, rather than merely adapting to it. That examination extended into popular culture. Some women began viewing advertisements differently. The smiling housewives, the perfect kitchens, the flawless families. Images that once seemed aspirational sometimes began appearing incomplete. Not false, incomplete, because they represented only one version of reality. And countless women knew from personal experience that reality contained much more. Contained disappointment, ambition, loneliness, creativity, conflict, growth. Experiences rarely visible in polished promotional images. The contrast between image and reality became increasingly difficult to overlook, especially for women who had spent years trying to align themselves with ideals that never fully reflected who they were. The women who did not fit in often carried a unique burden. They were expected to adjust themselves to the ideal. The ideal was rarely expected to adjust itself to them. That imbalance shaped countless lives. Some women spent years attempting to become what others wanted them to be. Years trying to suppress ambitions. Years trying to silence questions. Years trying to convince themselves that fulfillment should look a certain way. Eventually, many reached a simple but transformative realization. Perhaps fulfillment is personal. Perhaps no single formula works for everyone. Perhaps different women require different lives. The idea sounds almost obvious, yet its implications were profound. Because once society accepts that women are individuals rather than a category defined by a single role, countless assumptions begin unraveling. The process was already underway. Slowly, quietly, not yet complete, but impossible to stop entirely. The women who did not fit in were no longer merely enduring expectations. Increasingly, they were questioning whether those expectations deserved authority at all. And every question weakened the certainty that had once seemed unshakable. The image remained. The reality was catching up. The image remained, but the reality was no longer standing quietly behind it. It was pressing forward in small, steady ways. Not dramatic enough to rewrite the decade in a single moment, but consistent enough to reshape how people thought, spoke, and understood their own lives. By this point, many women had moved beyond simple private confusion. The feeling of "something is wrong with me" was gradually being replaced with something more structured, more analytical, and more unsettling to the older order. The question had changed shape. Instead of personal blame, there was comparison. Instead of silence, there was language forming. Instead of isolation, there was recognition. And recognition changes everything. In households across the country, women began to compare not just their circumstances, but their assumptions. Why did marriage feel like a full definition of identity for women but not for men? Why did ambition sound acceptable in one direction but questionable in another? Why did the same behavior produce praise in one person and criticism in another? These were not abstract philosophical questions. They were rooted in daily life, in conversations, in workplaces, in family gatherings, in the quiet internal negotiation between what was felt and what was allowed to be expressed. One of the most significant developments of this period was how many women began noticing the emotional labor required simply to maintain social harmony. Smiling when frustrated, agreeing when uncertain, remaining calm when feeling dismissed, choosing words carefully to avoid appearing too much or too opinionated. This constant calibration became so normal that many did not initially recognize it as labor at all. Simply felt like personality, or maturity, or being well-adjusted. But over time, the accumulation of that effort created fatigue. Not physical fatigue alone. Emotional fatigue. A sense that parts of the self were always being edited before they could be expressed. And edited lives often produce quiet dissatisfaction that is difficult to name. During the late 1950s, the language for naming that experience was still limited in mainstream culture. There were words for unhappiness, words for stress, words for disappointment, but fewer accepted words for structural mismatch between identity and expectation. So women improvised. They described feelings indirectly. They spoke in fragments. They hinted rather than declared. Yet even indirect language created connection. Because once someone understands what another person is implying, distance begins to shrink. Another important layer was generational tension. Younger women were growing up in a world that promised opportunity more openly than it delivered it equally. They were encouraged to study, to aspire, to develop skills, to imagine futures that extended beyond traditional boundaries. Yet when those imaginations moved toward concrete plans, the older expectations often reappeared. The contradiction was difficult to miss. Be independent but not too independent. Be educated but not necessarily career-focused. Be capable but not necessarily ambitious. Be confident but still deferential. This tension created a subtle psychological conflict. Young women were being trained in two overlapping systems at once. One system encouraged expansion. The other encouraged restraint. Living between those systems required constant adjustment. and constant adjustment shapes identity over time. Some adapted by narrowing their ambitions early. Others delayed decisions. Others tried to balance both worlds simultaneously, often with mixed results. None of these responses were simple. Each carried emotional consequences. Meanwhile, the broader culture continued reinforcing a single dominant narrative. Magazines, advertising, and television programs repeatedly returned to the same central image: the fulfilled homemaker. She was organized, composed, content, efficient, surrounded by well-behaved children and a stable household. The image was powerful because it offered clarity. It suggested that life had a clear answer, correct structure, predictable path to happiness. But clarity is not the same as accuracy. Many women who encountered that image regularly began noticing the gap between representation and experience. Their homes were not perfectly organized. Their emotions were not always stable. Their lives were not always predictable. And more importantly, their desires were not always aligned with the image being promoted. This gap did not automatically produce rebellion. Often it produced reflection, quiet questioning, a reevaluation of assumptions. Some women adjusted their expectations of themselves. Others adjusted their understanding of society. A smaller number began actively seeking change, even when change was not yet fully defined. At the same time, important intellectual currents were beginning to circulate more widely. Sociology, psychology, and emerging discussions about identity and society provided new frameworks for understanding personal experience. Ideas that had once been confined to academic circles were slowly reaching broader audiences. Some women encountered these ideas through reading, others through education, others through conversation. These frameworks offered something many had been missing: language for their experiences. Language matters because it allows private feelings to become shared concepts. And shared concepts can be discussed, examined, and developed. A woman who once thought, "Something feels wrong but I cannot explain it," might begin thinking instead in more structured terms. Why are expectations distributed this way? Why do certain roles carry more authority? Why do my ambitions feel incompatible with what is expected? The shift from vague discomfort to structured questioning marks a critical stage in cultural change. It is the point where personal experience begins connecting to broader analysis. And once that connection is made, the situation changes fundamentally, because it becomes harder to return to pure acceptance. Even if a person continues living within existing structures, they no longer interpret those structures in the same way. They see them differently. They understand them differently. They question them differently. By the end of this period, the women who did not fit in were no longer simply reacting to their environment. They were beginning to interpret it. And interpretation is the beginning of change. Not the final stage, but a necessary one. The world of the 1950s still appeared stable on the surface. But beneath that surface, interpretation was spreading, quietly, carefully, across conversations that most outsiders would never hear. And within those conversations, a new awareness was forming, one that would soon move beyond private reflection and into public discussion. But for now, it remained in transition, half hidden, half articulated, yet unmistakably present. Interpretation was spreading, but it was still fragile. It existed in fragments rather than fully formed ideas. Conversation here, book there. A moment of recognition in an otherwise ordinary day. Many women did not yet have a unified framework for what they were experiencing. They had impressions, patterns, questions, but not yet a shared vocabulary strong enough to organize those thoughts into a public movement. That is an important distinction in history. Change does not begin when everyone agrees on what is happening. It begins when enough people begin noticing that something is happening at all. For women who did not fit into the dominant expectations of the 1950s, this stage often felt like standing at the edge of understanding without fully stepping into it. They could see inconsistencies more clearly. They could sense contradictions more sharply. But the broader meaning was still forming. In many cases, the first step was simply comparison. A woman comparing her life to another woman's life. A conversation revealing unexpected similarity. A shared frustration expressed casually, almost accidentally. "I thought I was the only one who felt like this." That sentence, repeated in many different places, carried enormous significance. Because isolation had been one of the strongest forces maintaining silence. When people believe their experience is unique, they are less likely to speak about it. When they realize it is shared, speaking becomes easier. Still not easy, but easier. Another key factor during this time was the gradual shift in how women understood responsibility for their own dissatisfaction. Earlier in the decade, many internalized discomfort as personal inadequacy. If life felt unfulfilling, the assumption was often that the problem lay within the individual. Not trying hard enough, not appreciating enough, not adapting well enough. But as shared experiences accumulated, this interpretation began to weaken. A different explanation started to emerge. What if the problem was not individual failure, but structural expectation? What if the issue was not personal weakness, but limited possibility? This shift did not eliminate guilt immediately. Cultural beliefs rarely disappear cleanly. They linger. They compete with newer ideas. They coexist in tension. So many women found themselves holding two interpretations at once. One internal voice still shaped by traditional expectations. Another voice beginning to question them. This internal conflict became a defining feature of the period for many. It also explains why change often appears slow from the outside. From within, it is rarely a simple switch. It is negotiation between past and present, between inherited belief and emerging understanding, between obligation and desire. At the same time, everyday life continued in its familiar rhythm. Households still had to be managed. Children still needed care. Work still had to be performed. Communities still functioned according to established expectations. The structure of daily life did not pause for reflection, which meant that reflection often happened in fragments, in short moments, during routine tasks, while folding laundry, while preparing meals, while commuting, while sitting quietly after others had gone to sleep. These ordinary moments became the space where deeper questioning developed. Not through dramatic revelation, but through repetition. Another important element was the role of time itself. As women moved from early adulthood into middle age, their relationship with expectations shifted. In youth, many believed that future possibilities remained open-ended. There was always time. Time to pursue ambitions later. Time to explore interests later. Time to reconsider choices later. But as years passed, the sense of unlimited time gradually narrowed. Responsibilities accumulated. Opportunities became more complex to pursue. Life became more structured. And reflection intensified. Not necessarily because circumstances worsened, but because awareness increased. A woman in her 30s or 40s might look back and see paths that once seemed open but now appeared distant. This does not automatically produce regret, but it often produces evaluation. A reassessment of what has been gained and what has been set aside. Some women felt satisfaction with their choices. Others felt ambivalence. Others felt a mixture of both, often difficult to articulate. This complexity is essential to understanding the period accurately. The women who did not fit in were not a single group with identical experiences. They represented a spectrum of responses to similar cultural pressures. Some adapted fully and found fulfillment within traditional roles. Some partially adapted while maintaining private ambitions. Some resisted openly or quietly. Some left traditional paths entirely. What united them was not outcome. It was tension. A tension between self-definition and social expectation. As the 1950s moved closer to the early 1960s, this tension became more visible in cultural discussion, even if still limited. Writers, educators, and thinkers began to explore questions that had previously remained private. Why do certain roles dominate expectations? How are identities shaped by social norms? What happens when individuals do not conform to those norms? These questions did not yet dominate mainstream conversation, but they were entering it, slowly, carefully, sometimes indirectly. Meanwhile, the public image of the ideal woman continued to circulate widely. It remained persuasive because it offered simplicity, clear structure for life, a recognizable standard, a sense of order in a changing world. But simplicity can conceal complexity rather than resolve it. And more women were beginning to notice what that simplicity left out. Not in rejection of family life, not in rejection of tradition itself, but in recognition that tradition was not sufficient to describe every life. The women who did not fit in were increasingly aware of this gap. And awareness, once established, does not easily disappear. Evolves, deepens, finds expression, even when expression remains limited, even when language is incomplete, even when the broader culture is not yet ready to fully hear it. The groundwork was being laid, quietly, across many individual lives. And although no single moment defined the change, the accumulation of these quiet realizations was moving steadily toward something larger. Something that would soon become impossible to keep within private conversation alone. Something larger was forming, but it was still scattered across individual lives. Not yet organized, not yet named in a unified way within mainstream culture, but undeniably present in the patterns of experience being shared between women who, only a few years earlier, might have believed they were alone in their thoughts. This stage of social change is often the least visible, because it does not yet have institutions. It does not yet have public leaders. It does not yet have widely recognized language. What it has instead is repetition. The same kinds of experiences appearing again and again in different settings, different cities, different households, different occupations, yet similar emotional structures beneath them. A sense of constraint that is difficult to explain but easy to recognize once described by someone else. A sense of expectation that feels fixed, even when no one explicitly states it as a rule. A sense of identity narrowing over time, not through a single decision but through many small ones. One of the most significant developments during this period was the gradual realization that dissatisfaction was not always personal pathology. For years, many women had been taught, directly or indirectly, that emotional discomfort within a stable life meant something was wrong internally. That a good home should produce contentment. That stability should produce satisfaction. That fulfillment should arise naturally from fulfilling prescribed roles. So when dissatisfaction appeared, it often felt like contradiction. How could a life that appeared successful produce inner restlessness? The most common early answer was self-criticism. But as shared experiences accumulated, alternative interpretations became harder to ignore. If many women in different places describe similar feelings, the explanation cannot easily remain purely individual. It begins to suggest a pattern in expectations themselves. This shift in interpretation did not remove emotional difficulty. It did not immediately resolve conflict, but it changed its meaning. And meaning is powerful, because how a person interprets their experience often determines how they respond to it. During this period, many women began re-evaluating earlier life choices through a new lens. Decisions that once felt natural were now examined with more complexity. Not necessarily regret, but analysis. Why was this path chosen? What alternatives were considered? Which possibilities were discouraged? Which ambitions were never fully pursued? These reflections were often private. They did not always lead to external change. But internally, they marked a shift from acceptance to examination. At the same time, external structures remained largely intact. Employment systems still reflected long-standing assumptions. Educational pathways still channeled expectations in gendered directions. Social norms still reinforced traditional family structures as primary indicators of success. The system was not static in a literal sense, but it was stable enough to maintain strong cultural momentum. And yet, within that stability, small deviations were becoming more visible. Women returning to education after marriage. Women maintaining careers while raising children. Women remaining unmarried by choice or circumstance without disappearing from public life. Women engaging in civic work, intellectual pursuits, and creative production in more visible ways. Each of these examples might have been treated as individual exceptions, but collectively they pointed toward expanding possibility. Another important factor was communication. As mobility increased and media expanded, women had more opportunities to encounter perspectives beyond their immediate environment. Ideas that were once geographically or socially contained began circulating more widely. This circulation did not immediately transform belief systems, but it introduced variation. And variation is essential for change. Because without variation, expectations appear uniform. With variation, alternatives become visible. And once alternatives are visible, even if not fully accepted, they begin influencing perception. A woman might still follow traditional expectations in practice, but now she is aware that other lives exist. That awareness alone can reshape how she understands her own, can introduce comparison where none existed before. And comparison often leads to evaluation. Is this the only way? Is this the only path? Is this the only definition of fulfillment available? These questions were becoming more frequent, not in public debate yet, but in private thought, in conversations between trusted friends, in moments of quiet reflection. Another layer involved emotional articulation. Many women struggled to describe what they were experiencing because the available language was limited. Words like unhappy or stressed did not fully capture the complexity of their feelings. What they were describing was often not simple unhappiness. It was a mixture. Fulfillment in some areas, constraint in others, gratitude alongside restlessness, love alongside limitation, satisfaction alongside curiosity about what remained unexplored. This mixture is difficult to summarize in conventional terms, but it is common in human experience. The difficulty lies in naming it, and naming is the first step toward collective understanding. As the 1950s transitioned toward the early 1960s, more attempts were made to articulate these experiences in broader cultural terms. Writers began exploring themes of identity and expectation. Educators and social commentators began examining roles and social structures more critically. Public discourse slowly expanded, even if cautiously. These developments did not immediately overturn established norms, but they signaled that the conversation itself was changing. Meanwhile, the lived reality of many women continued in its familiar rhythm. Daily responsibilities did not diminish. Expectations did not vanish. Pressures did not disappear. Instead, something subtler occurred. The same external life began being interpreted differently. A woman performing routine tasks might still fulfill them as before, but internally she might now be observing her own experience with greater awareness, noticing patterns, questioning assumptions, recognizing constraints that previously felt invisible. This internal shift is often where larger transformations begin. Not in institutions, not in policies, but in perception. Because once perception changes, interpretation follows. And once interpretation changes, possibilities begin to expand, even before external conditions change. By this stage, the women who did not fit in were no longer simply reacting to expectations. They were developing frameworks for understanding them. That development marked an important transition point. From private discomfort to structured awareness. From isolated feeling to shared pattern recognition. From adaptation to early stages of critique. The system remained intact, but its authority over interpretation was weakening. And that weakening, though subtle, was irreversible. The weakening of certainty did not feel like collapse. Felt like hesitation. A pause in assumptions that had once seemed automatic. A slight questioning of sentences that previously went unexamined. A growing awareness that not every rule carried the same weight it once did. For women who did not fit in, this was a subtle but meaningful shift. Because authority in social life is rarely enforced only through laws or institutions. It is also maintained through belief, through repetition, through the assumption that this is just how things are. When that assumption begins to loosen, even slightly, the entire structure feels different. By this stage, many women were no longer experiencing their dissatisfaction as something purely internal. They were beginning to see it as something that interacted with the world around them. Not just "I feel restless," but "I feel restless in relation to certain expectations." That distinction matters. It moves the experience from purely psychological framing towards social understanding. And social understanding changes how people respond. Some women began adjusting their lives in small but meaningful ways. Not dramatic departures, not sudden transformations, but incremental changes in behavior and choice. Choosing to continue education a little longer. Choosing to remain in the workforce despite pressure to leave. Choosing to speak more openly in certain conversations. Choosing to spend more time on personal interests, even in limited ways. Each action on its own might appear minor, but collectively, they represented a quiet renegotiation of identity. At the same time, many women remained within traditional structures and did not seek change in external form. That is an important point often lost in simplified narratives. The women who did not fit in were not a single group moving in one direction. They were a diverse population responding differently to similar pressures. Some reinterpreted their roles without changing them. Some modified their expectations while maintaining structure. Some gradually expanded their autonomy within existing boundaries. And some eventually stepped outside those boundaries entirely. What connected them was not uniform behavior. It was awareness. Awareness that expectations were not neutral facts of life, but socially produced frameworks that could be examined. This awareness was often accompanied by a growing interest in comparison across lives. Women increasingly compared experiences not as isolated stories but as patterns. Why did certain frustrations appear so frequently? Why did similar tensions arise in different households? Why did ambition seem acceptable in some contexts and discouraged in others? Comparison did not always lead to dissatisfaction. Sometimes it led to reassurance. Sometimes it led to validation. Sometimes it led to clarification of personal priorities. But it consistently introduced a new dimension into how life was interpreted. Another important element of this period was the evolving role of language in shaping understanding. As women encountered new ideas through reading, education, and conversation, they began developing more precise ways of describing their experiences. They did not necessarily use formal theoretical terms, but they moved toward more structured explanations. Instead of vague discomfort, they began identifying specific tensions between expectation and desire, between role and identity, between external approval and internal fulfillment. This increasing precision in language matters historically, because social change often requires conceptual tools before it becomes visible in action. Without language, experiences remain private and fragmented. With language, they become communicable and shareable. And once experiences can be shared, they can be compared. And once compared, they can form patterns. Meanwhile, the broader culture was still strongly oriented toward stability. Institutions continued reinforcing traditional family structures as central to social order. Media continued presenting idealized versions of domestic life. Education and employment systems still largely reflected earlier assumptions about gender roles. Yet beneath that stability, interpretive change was underway. The same structures were being seen differently by increasing numbers of people. A household was no longer only a symbol of fulfillment, could also be a site of negotiation. A workplace was no longer only a source of opportunity, could also be a site of limitation. A marriage was no longer only an endpoint. It could also be a dynamic relationship requiring continuous adjustment of expectations. These shifts in interpretation did not require visible rebellion to exist. They existed in thought, in conversation, in private reflection. In the subtle ways people began to question what once seemed unquestionable. One of the most significant outcomes of this stage was the reduction of self-blame. Many women gradually moved away from interpreting their dissatisfaction as personal inadequacy. Instead, they began considering structural explanations alongside personal ones. This did not eliminate emotional difficulty, but it changed its direction. Rather than asking, "What is wrong with me?" some began asking, "What is shaping this experience?" That shift is subtle in wording but profound in effect, because it changes the location of the problem. From individual character to shared context. From private failure to collective condition. And once a condition is recognized as shared, it becomes discussable. And once discussable, it becomes negotiable. This is where the early foundations of broader cultural change were being laid. Not yet in public institutions, not yet in policy, but in perception, across countless individual lives slowly arriving at similar realizations. The women who did not fit in were still living within the structures of the 1950s, but they were no longer interpreting those structures in the same way as before. And that difference in interpretation was quietly preparing the ground for what would come next. A period in which these private questions would begin to enter public conversation more directly. But for now, they remained in transition, present, growing, unresolved, and increasingly difficult to ignore, even when no one spoke them aloud. By this stage, even silence had begun to feel different. In earlier years, silence often meant acceptance, or at least it was interpreted that way. A woman did not complain, therefore she must be content. A household appeared orderly, therefore it must be stable. A life followed expected patterns, therefore it must be fulfilling. But as awareness expanded, silence became harder to read so simply. Because women now understood that silence could mean many things. Could mean contentment, but it could also mean caution. Could mean adaptation. Could mean endurance. Could mean private questioning without public expression. It could mean a life carefully managed on the outside while being intensely examined on the inside. This complexity made the older assumptions less reliable. Appearances no longer felt like complete explanations. For women who did not fit in, this recognition often brought a quiet sense of relief, not necessarily because their circumstances changed, but because interpretation changed. To understand that your experience is not unique, and not necessarily a personal flaw, can alter how you carry it. The weight does not disappear, but it becomes more understandable. And what is understood is often more bearable than what is confused. During this period, many women began revisiting earlier life decisions with new awareness. Not to rewrite the past, but to reinterpret it. A marriage entered at a young age might be seen differently through the lens of expectation rather than pure choice. A career paused might be reconsidered in terms of structural pressure rather than simple preference. A sense of limitation might be recognized as something shaped by environment rather than internal deficiency. This reinterpretation did not produce a single emotional outcome. For some, it brought clarity. For others, sadness. For many, a complex mixture of both. But across these responses, something important was happening. Women were beginning to locate their experiences within a larger social framework. That shift marked a turning point in understanding. Because once personal experience is understood as part of a broader pattern, it becomes possible to imagine collective responses. Not immediate action necessarily, but shared recognition. And shared recognition is the foundation of future change. At the same time, everyday life continued in its familiar rhythm. Children still needed care. Homes still needed maintenance. Jobs still required attention. Communities still operated according to established expectations. The external world did not pause to accommodate internal reflection. This created a distinctive duality. On the surface, continuity. Internally, reinterpretation. Many women lived both realities simultaneously. They performed expected roles while reconsidering the meaning of those roles. They maintained routines while questioning the assumptions behind them. They participated in social structures while observing those structures with increasing analytical distance. This dual awareness became a defining feature of the period for many who did not fully fit the dominant expectations. Another important development involved communication between women of different backgrounds. As mobility increased and social circles expanded, women who might previously have remained isolated within local communities began encountering broader perspectives. Conversations that once would have remained local began connecting across regions, professions, and life circumstances. This did not create uniform agreement, but it created resonance, a recognition that certain experiences were not confined to a single environment. That resonance is powerful, because it transforms private uncertainty into shared understanding without requiring formal organization. It is often in this stage that cultural change becomes irreversible in the long term, not because systems have changed yet, but because perception has shifted widely enough that returning to previous assumptions becomes increasingly difficult. The idealized image of the 1950s woman still held cultural influence. It still appeared in media, still shaped expectations, still guided many decisions. But it was no longer the only available frame through which women interpreted their lives. It had become one frame among others. And once multiple frames exist, interpretation becomes plural rather than singular. Plural interpretation introduces flexibility, and flexibility changes behavior over time. Some women adjusted their lives outwardly. Some adjusted their understanding internally. Some began preparing for changes they could not yet fully define. Others simply continued observing the growing gap between expectation and experience. What mattered most at this stage was not immediate transformation. It was accumulation. Each conversation added another layer. Each reflection added another perspective. Each shared experience added another point of confirmation. Slowly, the idea that something is wrong with me was being replaced by something more complex and more accurate. Something is happening around me that shapes how I experience my life. That realization does not solve everything, but it changes the direction of inquiry. And direction matters in history, because once inquiry shifts from individual adequacy to structural understanding, the questions themselves begin to evolve. They become less about adjustment, and more about possibility. Not just how do I fit in, but increasingly, what else is possible? That question, still forming in many minds by the end of this stage, would soon become central to broader public discussions. But even before it reached public visibility, it had already begun reshaping private thought. And private thought, multiplied across millions of lives, often becomes the quiet engine of social transformation. The women who did not fit in were still living within the 1950s, but they were no longer confined to a single way of interpreting it. And that shift, though subtle, had already changed everything that would follow. What else is possible? By the time that question fully formed in the minds of many women, the quiet structure of the previous decade had already begun to loosen beyond repair. Not collapse, not replacement, but loosening, like something tightly bound that can no longer hold every part of itself in the same position. The late 1950s did not end with a single defining moment for women who did not fit in. There was no clean break in which the old expectations vanished and new ones immediately appeared. Instead, there was transition, uneven, incomplete, sometimes contradictory. The same household could contain both tradition and questioning. The same workplace could contain both opportunity and limitation. The same conversation could contain both acceptance and doubt. This coexistence defined the period more accurately than any single label. For many women, daily life still followed familiar structures. But internally, interpretation had changed permanently. They no longer saw those structures as neutral facts. They saw them as constructed systems. Systems shaped by history, by culture, by expectation, by repetition. And once something is understood as constructed, it becomes mentally possible to imagine it differently. Even if change is not immediately achievable, imagination has already moved ahead of reality. That is where the women who did not fit in ultimately arrived. Not at resolution, but at awareness that resolution was not singular. There were multiple ways to live, multiple ways to define fulfillment, multiple ways to interpret identity. Some women would continue within traditional roles and find meaning there. Others would expand roles gradually. Others would eventually step into entirely different life structures. There was no single outcome that defined them all. What defined them was the breaking of a singular narrative. The idea that one model of womanhood could contain every life had begun to weaken, not disappear, weaken. And weakening in social history is often more important than collapse, because collapse ends something. Weakening opens space. Space for variation, space for negotiation, space for new expectations to form. The women who did not fit in were part of that opening. Their experiences, once interpreted as personal dissatisfaction, had become part of a broader recognition that lived reality was more diverse than cultural ideals suggested. That recognition did not immediately transform institutions, but it transformed understanding. And understanding is the slow foundation upon which later change is built. As this period closed, many women carried forward a new internal landscape. They still lived in the same external world, but they did not interpret it in the same way. They had seen the gap between image and experience. They had heard similar stories from others. They had begun to question assumptions that once felt unquestionable. And they had started to imagine alternatives, even if vaguely. That imagination did not always lead to immediate action. Sometimes it remained private. Sometimes it remained unfinished. Sometimes it remained unspoken. But it existed. And its existence mattered. Because once a society contains enough people who can imagine something different, even without agreeing on what it should be, the conditions for change are already present. The 1950s, when viewed through the experiences of women who did not fit in, are not simply a story of conformity or comfort. They are also a story of internal divergence. Between expectation and identity, between image and experience, between prescribed roles and personal complexity. The dark truth, if it can be called that, is not a single dramatic revelation. It is the accumulation of ordinary lives revealing that a single definition was never enough. Not for ambition, not for desire, not for intelligence, not for individuality, not for the full range of what women were capable of being. And as this recognition spread quietly through private lives, it ensured that the future would not remain identical to the past. Not immediately, not evenly, but inevitably. Now, in the stillness after reflection, imagine the world not as it was described to you, but as it was experienced, layered, uneven, full of small negotiations between expectation and self. And let that understanding settle slowly. Breathe lightly. No urgency remains here. Only the quiet awareness of a world that was never as simple as it appeared. And then gently return.